Wait. You have a TV?
No. I just like to read the TV guide. Read the TV guide. You don't need a TV. Television addict! Television addict! Television addict!
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new edition of TV Guidance Counselor. I am Ken Reed, as always, your TV Guidance Counselor, here to talk about classic television using back issues of TV Guide magazine from my personal collection. Yeah, I messed up my own patois. Is that what I have no idea. I'm not very well educated. I messed up my own patter from my personal collection as the gateway into our collective past. And this week's a little bit different in that my guest used a TV guide from her personal collection. This was a BYOTVG, which is always pretty impressive. And you'll hear why in a moment. My guest is the incredible Amanda Reyes. She is an expert on made-for-TV movies, a fellow horror movie fan. She literally wrote the book on made-for-TV movies called Are You in the House Alone? I recommend it to people all the time. It is an invaluable resource and just a fun thing to read. I often just flip through it just for the hell of it. She is super smart, very funny, super accomplished. I've wanted to have her on the show for a really long time, and I'm glad that I finally convinced her to do it. She also has her own podcast. I'll put links up to all that stuff on tvguidancecounselor.com, where you can find all of her stuff, which you will undoubtedly love. And you're going to go away from this episode with a huge list of made-for-TV movies to watch, and that'll be fun. And when you watch them, you can email me at tvguidancecounselor@gmail.com or ken@ikenread.com, or you can at me at Kenneth W. Reed or at TV Guidance, and you can tell me what you thought of those, or if you have guest suggestions for the show, or you just want to check in, let me know how you're doing in this awful, 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 awful year that is 2020. Whew. I'll get into it. You know what? People enjoyed last year when I did the year-end roundup for my last episode of the year, where I did like sort of a director's commentary of every episode, and then sort of what I was doing. So I'll get into it then. But yeah. Anyway, you're going to enjoy this episode because I loved doing it, and this was informative and fun and just a good time. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode of TV Guidance Counselor with my guest, Amanda Reyes.
TV is my friend, and it has been always there for me in time of need.
Live via satellite, Amanda Reyes. How are you?
Fine. That sounds so fancy. Live via satellite. I was in the green room, and then they brought me out to the special studio.
Yeah, and you're wearing that full Elvis Aloha outfit.
Absolutely.
It is technically via satellite, which is oddly true.
It's much more glamorous than I've been giving it credit for.
Yeah, I mean, you're in space right now, sort of, which is a good thing I don't smoke pot, because that would probably blow my mind for 2 weeks. I said that there. You're in Texas, right? You're in the Austin area?
I'm in Austin, yeah.
Did you grow up out there?
No, I actually grew up in Las Vegas, where your friend Stephanie Crawford is from. And
yeah.
Yeah, I was born in LA. Well, not LA. I was born in Ventura, close to LA. And then when I was very, very young, from about 7 to about 25, I lived in Vegas. Then I lived in LA for 13 years. And then I moved to Maryland, and then Pittsburgh, and then Austin.
Oh, that's quite a journey.
Yeah, I've been everywhere.
Pittsburgh's one of the cities I'd like to go visit again. I enjoyed Pittsburgh.
I love Pittsburgh. I miss it. It's a beautiful town, and the people are really cool.
Yeah, it's so cool with all the weird bridges that go in, and it's kind of like an island. And, you know, plus obviously as a Romero fan, it's great.
Yeah. They have a really nice horror community there in general, yeah.
The only time I went there was I was working for an educational software company, and I volunteered to do some trade show in Pittsburgh just so I could go to the Monroeville Mall.
Yeah, of course.
And it was one of the best things I ever did. It was worth that terrible job just for that. So Vegas, the weirdest thing to me is that anyone grows up there. It doesn't seem, but it's just like any other place.
Yeah, I think Stephanie made it sound nicer than I think it is, like in my memory of it. Yeah, like, she was like, it's just a normal suburban place. And it kind of is, with the exception of the strip in downtown. But it's not, I didn't love living there. You know, I was happy to go. But the people, like my friends, are great. The people that are there are really wonderful. But I think the town itself is kind of messy.
I just picture it like the half-built subdivisions in Pump Up the Volume or like Over the Edge. That's what I think of growing up in Las Vegas. Like, no idea how accurate that is.
No, it was like a real small town. So when I moved there, it was in the 70s. So, it hadn't really, there was no strip per se. There was like 2 casinos. I don't know if you've ever seen Corvette Summer, but.
Oh, of course I've seen Corvette Summer.
Yeah, that's what my childhood looked like where the strip had like 8 casinos and nobody really went there. And it was just desert. And the only mall we had was miles and miles and miles away. So it was like a trek for us to, I can't even remember the name of the mall now, but it was super far. The Maryland Square Mall, maybe. And it was super far. So then they built a mall near us called the Meadows. And that was like the big 80s hangout. And, but it was like a lot of nothing. And then some casinos. But by the time I left in like the 90s, it was like a mecca. Cause like, Steve Wynn had built, was it the Mirage? And like all these really plush casinos. And I think the Excalibur was there when I was still there. And like, so it became like and lots of famous people came, not just to perform, but to hang out. And it was just like this crazy place where like Barry Manilow would come into the bookstore I worked at, and Susan Anton and Penn and Teller. And it was almost like a mini, more glittery version of LA. So when I moved to LA, it was like I'd already kind of seen a lot of celebrities, but then the LA celebrities, they upped it a notch, where like, like Vanessa Redgrave would come into the bookstore I worked at and stuff like that. So
that I would be a little bit starstruck by. I'm pretty good at suppressing it, but I think that would have done me in.
She was awesome.
Vanessa Redgrave, yeah. So when you watch something like Vegas or The Nightstalker, do you have like a little twinge of your youth?
I do. Vegas was a big deal for me when I was a kid. I didn't watch Kolchak till I was older, but when I was a kid, they were shooting Vegas there, and it was inevitable that every Monday that I was at school, one of my friends would have seen Robert Urich tooling around Vegas, and they'd always say Dan Tana. We never said Robert Urich, and they're like, "Dude, I saw Dan Tana this weekend," and just hanging out somewhere. And so it would be really cool for us. But I was unfortunately never got to meet anybody from Vegas. But yeah, I loved it. And I think maybe it made Vegas look a little more glamorous than it was at that point. But they captured it pretty well, I think.
Well, the weirdest thing is, so you're growing up in the 70s in Vegas, and they're shooting Vegas with Robert Urich there, and you're seeing them shoot it, and it's basically capturing the Vegas you grew up in, although slightly glamorized. And then I'm growing up in Boston in the 80s, and they're shooting Spencer for Hire with Robert Urich here, and I'm watching them shoot it, and it captures the Boston I grew up in.
That's weird.
It's very strange that Urich has kind of spearheaded both those things.
He was such a part of our childhoods in the best ways possible.
It's a pretty good, I was going to say scam, but it's not a scam that he had running, where you shoot a show on location that is very tied in with a specific city, and then you're obviously going to become a huge celebrity in that city.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. I would imagine his life was pretty neat in those years. I would say especially with Spencer for Hire, because that show still to this day is so well loved. Oh yeah. But and I think people love Vegas, but it didn't last as long, and I don't think it's as well remembered. But Spencer for Hire, forget it. Everybody remembers it. And there's that great episode of Cheers where Woody is like a guest or something on the show. Isn't he like an extra?
Yeah, he's an extra, and they think he's lying.
Yeah, and then Robert Urich comes in, and it's so perfectly done. I love it.
Yeah, and that weirdly captures pretty much exactly what it was like here, because Boston's a big town for liars, and every generation has like a generational lie. And for the 80s, it was always either you or someone you were related to was on Spencer for Hire. It was always,
that's awesome,
because you couldn't confirm it.
Well, in Vegas, so I grew up in like the era of mobsters, and I won't say their first names, but I will give you just a clue about some of the kids I went to school with. Their last names were Gambino, Valentine, and Petracco. And there was a guy, and I can't remember his name, but he was a famous lawyer, and his son, quote unquote, I think it turned out to be an urban legend, used to go to all the parties. And I, of course, was a geek and never invited to the parties, but you'd always hear the story about this kid who would go to these parties, and he was the son of this guy. But I think he was telling stories, or he became a legend, and people just said they saw him, and I don't really know if he existed or not, but it was a thing that happened. And one of the kids at my neighboring high school, I think it was 2 kids, their dad, and I can't remember his name either, a famous mobster. He was murdered execution style while we all were in school together.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
That is, and also we had all the Whitey Bulger stuff here, and I do some of those people too. So it's weirdly similar.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I never thought of it that way. It's a kinship we have.
It's exactly. So you're in the elite group of TV guidance counselor guests who BYOTVG. You've brought your own TV guide.
Oh, yes, I have, yes.
And that just always impresses me. And you picked an issue from October 21st to the 27th, 1978? Is it 1978?
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
So we're the week before Halloween, and you and I are both horror fans as well. So this is a pretty cool week. I always like to see what was on Halloween-ish week in most TV guides. And it's the cast of WKRP on the cover. And what about this issue did you want to choose?
Well, when we talked about me coming on this show, one of the things we talked about is that I'm kind of an expert in made-for-TV movies.
You're downplaying it there. You're not just kind of an expert on TV movies. You're like the go-to TV movie person. You're like the most expert I could think of.
Well, as the most expert person on TV movies, we talked about talking just about TV movies, but I thought, wouldn't it be fun to pick a TV guide with a lot of TV movies in it? Because the 70s was really this amazing era where the TV movie really got a kickstart because of the ABC Movie of the Week, which started in '69. And by the mid to late 70s, there was tended to be an original made-for-TV movie on every night of the week. Not so much with this TV guide, but there's a lot of them. And so when I was flipping through my TV guides, I thought this one was pretty indicative of like what TV looked like in the late 70s in terms of just the incredible amount of output that was coming out. And also, I love WKRP. And there's one or two movies in here that I really, really liked. And I thought, oh, I could talk about these too. So I thought it'd be a really great issue.
What about the TV movies like did you latch on to that sort of be? Because obviously you're not like, I'm going to be an expert on TV movies. It's clearly a thing that you found an interest in and then just researched it till you were an expert on TV movies, I imagine.
Yeah, you know what? It was kind of funny. I watched them as a kid and I didn't really recognize that they were TV movies because I was just a little kid, but all the horror movies that would come on the local channel in the afternoon were like Gargoyles and Don't Be Afraid of the Dark. And so that was my gateway into horror. And so I was like 4, 5, 6, 7. Trilogy of Terror I saw when I was 7 and it just totally scarred me. And I loved them. And so when I got back into horror, I really concentrated on slasher movies because that's my number one love in terms of theatrical genre films. But I had a friend, I was living in LA and I had a friend named Ryan Orvis and he had a fanzine called Debaser and he asked me to write for him. And at the time I just wanted to really be a writer and I didn't know where to start. And he was kind enough to offer me like a monthly whatever I wanted to write. And so one issue I decided I would write about TV movies. And so I don't know how familiar you are with Eddie Brandt's Saturday Matinee in Los Angeles.
Yes.
But yeah, I don't know if you know that they have what's called a loaner list, which was just oodles and hundreds of thousands of VHS tapes that had all kinds of stuff on it that people just taped off their TVs and they couldn't rent them out because they weren't legal copies of things. But for every movie you rented, you could ask for something on their loaner list. And so
right.
they were like a second gateway into the TV movie. So I would go there and I would rent like the Hardy Boys, which I rented a lot of there. And I would ask for Bad Ronald or something. And this was before it had like a DVD release. This was right when DVD, I think, was kicking off.
So for people, I've mentioned this store before, but it was in North Hollywood, I think. And
yes.
I think it closed recently. But it was sort of the first video store in Los Angeles and they were massive. Like it was sort of like a brick and mortar location of something like Video Search of Miami or something almost.
Yeah, it was insane. And it was run by a guy named Donovan. Well, his dad owned it and Donovan ran it. And I remember one day I was there with my friend and we were trying to think of a movie title and it ended up being Arnold with Roddy McDowall. And we were like over in the W's or something and my friend Devin says, "Oh no, I think it's called Arnold. Let's go to the A's." And I'm running up to the front because we're so excited to see this movie. And I run by Quentin Tarantino and he gives me a thumbs up. Because we're renting Arnold. And the thing is that Quentin Tarantino, if you watch a lot of his movies, you'll see Donovan's name in the credits and the like thank you credits because they helped him with a lot of stuff and props and things like that. Right. And research. And so it was this amazing store. And so I was able to rent a lot of things. And so I picked like 10 TV movies that I remembered, really enjoying. I think it was 10, something like that. And then I wrote this article. And so I started kind of becoming a regular at Eddie Brandt's and checking out a lot of these movies and then going on eBay at the time when you could buy bootlegs and collecting what I could. It was, getting Bad Ronald on VHS was a real thing because everybody would bid on it. Yeah, it would go for like $40, $60. And I would always lose out on the bidding at the last minute and stuff. I finally got it. And then And then eventually it just kind of morphed into a blog. And then the blog sort of morphed into a book through Head Press. They were kind enough to invite me on to do some reviews, and then I kind of moved up to the spot of editor. And I ended up publishing a book, they published it, called Are You in the House Alone? A TV Movie Compendium, 1964 to 1999. And that was in 2017. And since then, I've been on like Blu-ray commentaries. I've even been in horror documentaries where they don't talk about TV. And I've written liner notes for things, and I've done a lot of lectures on TV movies around the world. I've just spoke in Berlin earlier this year, right before the pandemic hit, which is so amazing.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I go to England every year and I speak at conferences, and I've given lectures there. New York, LA, here in Texas. I've presented movies at the Austin Film Society as well as Alamo. And so it's become like a big thing. And so, it just keeps growing, and I feel really blessed. I don't necessarily like to use that word, but I do, and are grateful. And also there's like 5,000 TV movies, and it's going to be impossible to see all of them, but I've probably seen more of them than most people. And I get to keep looking at them. I keep finding them and I keep discovering them. And so it's something that just keeps growing, and it's been really amazing.
Before we get into the guide, is there a lost TV movie, or do you have like a white whale that you're like, that once you find that one?
Yeah, there is one. There's one. Well, there's a few probably, but the one that always comes to mind, and it's actually at the Library of Congress, is, it's sort of a movie. It's 60 minutes long. I'm going to go ahead and qualify it. I think it was originally part of the ABC Why World Mystery, which was that late night programming that used to come on like at 11:30 at night on ABC. And they showed a lot of episodes of Brian Clement's Thriller from England. Mm-hmm. And they also had a lot of original TV movies, which were shot on video. And, like the cloning of, Clifford Swimmer might be one you're familiar with, or, oh God, what's the one I'm thinking of? The Invasion of Carol Enders.
Oh yeah.
Was another big one. And so they had several of these, and most of them are lost. And I think that they're considered to not exist anymore. I don't know why, but somebody who did a lot of research on that actual, series told me that there's very few that I'm ever going to be able to find. But one of them is called Sorority Kill. And I want to see it because it sounds like a slasher, but it's really about somebody holding a sorority house hostage. And it's got Joanna Cameron from ISIS, Nicholas Hammond from Spider-Man, so we got those two together. It has Anthony Geary from General Hospital, who played Luke Spencer as one of the bad guys, I believe. And it was directed by Gloria Monty, who produced General Hospital later. She did several of the ABC Why World Mysteries, one of the only female directors working at the time, along with I think it was Leela Swift was the other woman that did the ABC Why World Mysteries. And at the time, there were very few female directors, but they were working a lot in that program. And anyway, Gloria Monty met Anthony Geary making Sorority Kill and remembered him when she was creating the character of Luke Spencer, who would end up becoming like the most iconic male character on a soap. And so to me, the movie is historically important. That's where my historical importance lies, in like soap operas and horror movies and things like that. And so I've been dying to see it since I've heard about it, but it's been missing, and all kinds of like glossy stills from the episode will show up online, but no trace of the film. But the guy who did this ABC Why World Mystery research, whose name I'm forgetting and I'm so embarrassed, he found Sorority Kill at the Library of Congress. So I'm planning to go and see it, hopefully. Oh,
wow. And I'm wondering if it was shot on video. So many of those were lost because they would wipe the tapes and reuse them, which is insane.
Yeah, it's so unfortunate. But there's this movie called The Norming of Jack 213 or 123. I can't remember. It's The Norming of Jack with 3 numbers. And Gloria Monty, I think, did that one as well. And I'm really dying to see it because Christopher Reeve is in it. It's one of the first things he ever did.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it turns out that people thought it was lost, but somebody filmed it like off TV or something, literally with like a film camera, or there's some film
like
print exists.
Like a kinescope of it, like a 16.
Yeah, I think, or somehow a 60 millimeter copy of it exists. Maybe it went into syndication or something. And they've been showing it at sci-fi conventions periodically. It's shown up like 2 or 3 times. And so that means it exists. So I'm kind of hoping that there's a couple other films like that we just don't know are around, and somebody has a reel of it somewhere, and it's just waiting in somebody's closet to be discovered. And then we can start to piece this series together better.
It's funny to think now, and especially people that are younger than us that are used to just having access to everything immediately, that there could be whole movies, 60 minutes I think counts technically for the Academy, that aired on a major network that could be lost. Like it just can't, like, that seems crazy probably to people, but they weren't made to play more than 1 or 2 times.
Absolutely. Like, I think some of them, so it depends on your local programmer. So if you were lucky, wherever you lived, if you had a local channel, sometimes these movies would pop up in like the afternoon movies of the week or whatever. But like, yeah, a lot of them were expected to just be very sort of expendable. And so they were like, they would make them and they would put some money behind marketing them. And if they were popular, they would rerun them. But yeah, like if you weren't home on Tuesday night when the ABC Movie of the Week aired, chances are you were never going to see that movie ever in your lifetime.
Yeah, and which is the kind of the whole point. Like, they want you there and then to see it. And if you miss it, you miss it. So that's what gets the ratings in. When you go over to the UK or to Europe, most of those movies, the TV movies, played as theatrical movies there. Is the conversation sort of different? Are they like, how was this a made-for-TV movie? We saw it in theaters.
Yeah, you know what? The thing is that when I went to Australia for my book launch, I was approached by this woman who was asking me about a movie from the 90s. Well, it didn't play theatrically. Let me start here. I think it's called, oh my God, of course, not can't remember her name, but Meredith Baxter-Bernie's in it. Kate's Secret, and she plays an anorexic or bulimic in it. Mm-hmm. And she saw it and she loved it. And to her, it was just a movie that came from Hollywood.
Right.
And it was cinema to her. She saw it on TV, but she saw it as just any other film that you would see that got released theatrically, right, in the States. To her, that's how she rated all of these movies. She saw them all as pieces of cinema. And I was so in love with her for that, because she really respected that, like Meredith Baxter-Bernie to her was a film star, right? And not just this TV movie actress. And so when I went to England, that they kind of had the same idea of that, because they did play theatrically, and a lot of them still rerun on TV over there. A friend of mine contacted me a couple years ago, and he's like, my mom's watching Madam Sin on the local channel. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. And he's like, yeah, some of these rerun all the time because they're just seen as old Hollywood films. And so they don't necessarily wonder, like, why is this a TV movie there and a theatrical here? It's more that they have maybe more reverence for it because they feel like it's just came from Hollywood. So therefore it's a Hollywood film. And I find that they tend to be more open to it, because here, a lot of things that I hear, and I don't think people mean it to be as disparaging as maybe I internalize it, but they're like, if somebody watches a movie and they think it's too slow or something, they'll say, oh yeah, it's like a TV movie. Mm-hmm. And that they meant it's sort of a denigration. But there, they don't necessarily make a distinction between the two. And so it was kind of nice to have that sort of respect for it that I don't necessarily find here.
I wonder if part of it stems from when we were growing up, you were a TV actor or a movie actor. And if you were in a made-for-TV movie, they were either trying to raise your profile a little bit from just your whatever series you were on, or you were sort of at the tail end of your career and you had been a theatrical actor and you now were going back to TV in these movies. So I think if you remove that aspect of it, that probably is a big part of it, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Well, the thing about the older actors that I find so interesting is TV did a lot. Well, we could talk about the demographics if you want. TV did a lot of things that theatricals couldn't do or wouldn't do. Like theatricals don't necessarily recognize the female audience the way they should. And a lot of TV movies are made for women, and they're made for women because the main demographic was women aged 18 to 49, because they were housewives usually in the 60s and 70s. And they were the ones buying products. So the advertisers wanted their product shown on things that women would see. So you'll see a lot of TV movies cater to women, especially in the 90s. Then they threw out all the metaphors that they were using in the 70s and 80s. And they're like, forget it. This is TV for women, right? And it was amazing. Right. But they also did things with like ageism. So I don't know if I'm veering off your question, but no. When we start talking about like, older actors on TV, like Olivia de Havilland doing The Screaming Woman, or most recently I have a podcast too, and we just covered Edward G. Robinson in The Old Man Who Cried Wolf, and so even the actors themselves were hesitant to do television because it was seen as second tier, but the kind of films that they were able to do were really exciting for them. They came to find out once they did come to TV, and the work was way more prevalent. And so in where I covered The Old Man Who Cried Wolf, I was talking a lot about Aaron Spelling, and Aaron Spelling was very aware of the fact that actors, as they got older, especially women, would get aged out of roles. And so he would create lots of products for them. He used Barbara Stanwyck a lot in television. In fact, I think he brought her over to the TV movie himself. She had already done the Big Valley and stuff, but he brought her really great diverse roles. He put Olivia de Havilland on like The Love Boat, and Edward G. Robinson was in The Old Man Who Cried Wolf, and so he was really good at utilizing these actors, and it was a great thing, especially as I get older. That it became a real venue, not only for women's stories, but for older women's stories, things you just don't see in theatricals anymore. So TV, although it is seen as sort of like the second tier or lesser than sort of medium, they were actually doing really amazing things, that just the theatricals are terrified to duplicate.
That never had occurred to me. That's fascinating. Before we jump into the guide here, I have to ask too, what is your favorite slasher movie, non-TV related, or a couple of favorites? I know it's hard to pick a favorite.
Yeah, it's hard. I will say, so in terms of just really scary, I'm going to have to think about that one. But in terms of favorites, I guess we're going to go back to speaking about women. That's a whole other thing too that we could talk about, because
I bet.
Slashers were actually targeting women too, and nobody wanted to believe that at the time that they were in their heyday. But if you've ever read Richard Knoll's Blood Money, he breaks down the marketing campaigns and things that the filmmakers were doing. So for instance, in Halloween, John Carpenter asked Deborah Hill to write the dialogue of the women when they're all hanging out together, the three friends, because he wanted it to be more organic and for women to relate to it when they watch the movie. Or in Black Christmas, the main character, played by Olivia Hussey, is having an abortion, and that's a response to second wave feminism and having autonomy over our own bodies. So these movies were very aware of female audiences. So there's a movie that always comes up, a couple of movies. One is Killer Party, which came out, I think, in 86, which is kind of a hybrid of like teen sex comedy, possession film, and slasher. And it was made in 2 weeks. It's nobody's favorite film in terms of the filmmaker. He just made it, I think, to fulfill a contract, but it's got these three amazing lead women in it. And the friendship is really organic, and so it makes the ending of the film, which is really dark, that much more impactful, because you actually really love the characters by the time you get to the end of the film, because they're so good in it. And there's another movie that's actually genuinely scary called He Knows You're Alone.
Oh, yes.
Which is all, Vera Dica, who wrote Games of Terror, which predates Men, Women, and Chainsaws, was the script consultant on that. And so there's a heavy focus on the women and the female friendship. And that's about women getting married and a man killing them, right? Because he was a jilted groom.
Tom Hanks is in that, right? He's in a small role in his room.
I think it's his first film, yeah. And that movie is about women discovering that they don't necessarily have to be a wife first. They can go to college and finish college. There's all kinds of political stuff happening. That's really amazing. In terms of scary movies, that's so hard. I feel like I just want to fall back. Maybe Halloween 1 or 2. Part 2 is actually my favorite, even though I know Halloween is a better made film. Halloween 2 really ups Friday the 13th Part 2. That would be my favorite. Friday the 13th Part 2. Whenever they up the ante, but they still maintain sort of the atmosphere and the dread, those are the movies that I love. Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned Black Christmas, and that movie, the phone calls still terrify me. Like, just the crazy, just the whole audio of the phone calls in that movie. I get freaked out every time I hear them, and I've seen that movie so many times.
Yeah, it's so weird because it's like three people doing the voices, but it's supposed to only be one person on the phone. And so, but you're hearing all these different sounds. And I think one of them is supposed to be actually Bob Clark, and I feel like the other one might be a woman. And don't quote me on this, but I believe that there were supposed to be three people intermixing. And so when you're listening to the call, it just sounds like a completely insane person. Yeah. Right? And it's an amalgamation of all these different things happening. But yeah, it's really effective. And also it has, because it's Bob Clark who did Porky's, it has a really nice amount of humor in all the right places in it. And it also has that great female friendship with Margot Kidder, Andrea Martin, and Olivia Hussey. And so you're actually like invested in the characters as you go through the film. It does everything right. It's like perfection. Yeah, I mean, Bob Clark, and again, I'm veering off topic, but again, it's my show, so I can't. So no one's going to tell me I can't. But Bob Clark's sort of pre-Porky's, pre-Christmas Story stuff is still sort of just the stuff of genre fans in a movie like Death Dream. Oh, so good. Which is brutal. Like that movie might be my favorite allegory for Vietnam or just war in general. Yeah. And there are scenes in that movie that, having seen it once and not seeing it again for decades, just haunted me forever. And it's such a good movie. Yeah, it's really good. And well, we can sort of tie it back to TV because the guy who played Andy, I think is the name of the character of the guy who comes back from Vietnam, right? Because it's the night that Andy came home. His name is Richard Backus, and he would go on to become a head writer on One Life to Live. For a number of years, and I think other soaps as well. And I was always fascinated by that because soaps and horror are like my two favorite things, and they're very similar in a lot of ways.
Right.
So in terms of melodrama, and that kind of stuff. And so, and audiences and things that they deal with in their films. So I thought he was a great bridge. And also the guy who wrote Prom Night. Prom Night's another one of my favorites. Now I'm thinking, no, I should have said Prom Night was my favorite. But the guy who did the story for that, Robert Guzzo, would go on to write for General Hospital for many years as well.
Oh, that's fascinating. I love Prom Night too. Totally different, but I'm a big fan of
it's great.
Mary Lou. It's a great one.
Yeah, it's great.
Have you watched The Good Wife or The Good Fight at all?
I haven't. I was listening to your episode with Stephanie Crawford, and you mentioned The Good Wife, and you said something really about the couple who created it, right? They did.
Yeah, they came out of
What?
Corman. They did not The Swarm, the cockroach one from 88 or 89.
Yeah, that's a really hard movie for me to watch. I know what you're talking about.
Are you
They
a bum
Nest?
kid? The Nest, yes, correct,
Yeah.
The Nest. And one of the main guys who's like one of the partners in the law firm, and I'm forgetting the actor's name, but he's the guy in Toby Hooper's Funhouse who's going, alive, alive, alive.
Oh, yeah.
He's the main, like one of the main partners in the law firm on the show.
Oh, that's amazing. It's
so
like
weird.
Conway or something is his last name. I think.
Yeah, it's Kevin Conway, I think. 'Cause
Something
I
like
always
that, yeah.
Confuse him for Kevin Conroy, who's a totally different thing. But yeah, it's funny how these people who worked in sort of low budget exploitation movies and genre movies transitioned very well in front of and behind the camera to made for TV movies and soap operas, because I think they were used to run and gun kind of work on seat of your pants, get something good for low money and quickly.
Yeah, I agree. Because TV movies had, like, if they were lucky. So there's a movie called, oh my gosh, now I can't remember the movie. George Kennedy's in it. Got Jim Davis from Dallas in it. And they did an interview with George Kennedy when they were making it. And they had an 18-day shoot, which is like a really extravagant shoot for a TV movie. And when you watch the film, you can't believe that they did it all in 18 days. Deliver Us from Evil. Because it's all outdoors and it's all like, sort of like, it's not a chase film, but there's a lot of like outdoor stunts and things. And you're like, wow, how did they do this in 18 days? And in 1970, when they did Crowhaven Farm, I was able to trace back when the production started, and it literally started 2 months before the movie aired. So they shot the movie in 2 weeks and then did all the post-production and then got it on the air in October, I think. And it was one of the top 10 highest rated TV movies that year and very well regarded to this day. And it's like, wow, they did that in 2 months. Mazes and Monsters, also with Tom Hanks. Mm-hmm. I think they had like a 3-month window from when they shot that to when it aired. So like, yeah, you want to use a lot of people who know how to do things very quickly.
Because they would often be, in Mazes and Monsters, a good example, sort of trying to capitalize on pop culture fads. So they would kind of want to get it out as quickly as possible, which was the same as Corman or, like Canon Films making Lambada movies as quickly as they could.
That's right. Together, right?
Yeah, it was sort of the same instinct. And I recently rewatched Earth Angel. Is it Earth Angel? Yes, Earth Angel with Eric Estrada and Kathy Podwell, who's in Night of the Demons. And I don't know if you've ever seen that one.
I haven't.
It's from 88, and it's basically like The Heavenly Kid meets Prom Night 2 if Prom Night 2 was not a horror movie.
Oh, I'm sold.
And it's pretty good. Like Kathy Podwell plays a girl who dies in a car crash in the 50s and, has to go back. It's not Malcolm McDowell. Roddy McDowell is her like angel supervisor that sends her back to help her, the son of the guy that she was with at the time. It's very, very much sort of cliche of about 6 movies that were popular that year. But when I watch it, I'm just like, wow, they must have been like, what's coming out in theaters this summer? Rush this out to be out at the same time.
Yeah, they're real good. That's not the other thing too about that they were so fast that they were able to deal with also topical issues. So they didn't always just follow like popular genres. Although like, of course, in the early 80s, we saw like Deadly Lessons as a slasher and fantasies and those kind of movies capitalizing on that craze. But like in the 70s, there was a lot of movies dealing with things that were happening in the moment. So they make them some really interesting cultural artifacts. So like, Maybe I'll Come Home in the Spring is commenting on like the counterculture movement. I don't know if you've seen that with Sally Field, where she kind of leaves this hippie commune, that she's really disenchanted with. I think David Carradine plays her boyfriend in it. And she comes home, and her home life in this quote unquote suburban utopia is also like completely falling apart. And it's about, where do these young people fit in society now? And now that the counterculture has become something not so great and people are leaving it, and yet they left it because their home life was so bad. And so that came out like right in the moment. And Aaron Spelling did a movie that I haven't seen yet called The Ballad of Andy Crocker with Lee Majors, about a guy coming home from Vietnam. And he did that in 1970 while we were still in Vietnam, right?
Wow.
And yeah, dealing with these things that you didn't necessarily see in the theater, and issues as we were dealing with them in our own lives. And so, the TV movie, especially in the 70s, was very important that way. And so even the horror stuff, like The Strange Possession of Mrs. Oliver, which is based off a Richard Matheson screenplay, with Karen Black, is dealing with second wave feminism in really interesting ways. And so, like, it was just really prevalent. I think the TV movie, the 70s, is really fascinating because so much of it, the horror in particular, was taking on a lot of stuff in metaphor. Mm-hmm. But if you're looking at it and thinking about the culture at the time, they completely match up.
Not for this chat, but at some point I am dying to talk to you about Silent Night, Deadly Night 4 and its connection to, I think, third wave feminism, because that movie. Whoa. Have you seen that?
I'm not sure, because I've seen a bunch of them, but I haven't seen all of them. It's
sort of like Cronenberg doing a movie about third wave feminism, but with Clint Howard in it. And like weird insect creatures, and it's about this sort of pagan cult of women who worship like the winter solstice. It's really not related to anything that's in any of the Silent Night, Deadly Night movies, and people just skip over it because it's weird. It's real weird.
I'm in.
Yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts on that if you get to see it. But to your point, yeah, that is fascinating how they would have these sort of topical things. The thing that came to mind instantly was Special Bulletin, which predated The Day After, I think, by like 2 or 3 years. And that was sort of the first nuclear Holocaust movie I can think of on TV in the very early days of the 80s sort of Cold War thing. And that's something that specifically, that movie, you could only do on TV because it was presented as a news broadcast. That's
right. I haven't seen it in years, but I remember it. Was Martin Sheen in that?
No, he's in Dawn's Early Light.
Oh, okay.
What I'm thinking of.
No, I know what you're talking about, because it's like a news bulletin where they're like coming in. Why am I thinking Martin Sheen's? But I know I think I saw it when it originally aired, but I don't think I've seen it since.
It's Marshall Hershkowitz, and it's the two guys who did 30-something in My So-Called Life. It's one of the first things they did. And yeah, the plot is some terrorists basically in a harbor in New York get a hold of a nuclear submarine or nuclear ship and explode it, and it's all presented as live news broadcasts, and it's terrifying. It's pretty fascinating. But let's dive in here. So we got 1978, the week before Halloween, and the first thing you said you want to mention here was one of the articles.
Yeah, so I read a little bit of it. I flipped through it. So the thing about TV Guides is, so when I was a kid, we didn't get TV Guide. We just got the local, whatever came in the newspaper on Sundays, which was like, I don't know, whatever was big, and it had a lot of information in it, but it was nothing like the TV Guide. And it wasn't until I was older that I started collecting them. And just recently, a woman, and I don't know if she wants me to name her or not, but she was a programmer for a channel in LA. She, as a child and as a young adult, saved all of the TV guides from like some part of the 60s into the 90s, and she actually donated them to me recently.
Oh, lucky.
Yeah, so I have like every TV guide from like 1968 to like 1990 maybe. And so I had been collecting them beforehand, but hers are in pristine condition. So I'm really lucky, because the ones I had were just things I could pick up that I could afford. And one of the things I love about them is that they're so full of information. And the older ones were really wild, because I'm assuming you've gone through some really old issues, but they had like fashion shoots, they would get like Loretta Swit to put on like a fur coat, and then they would interview her about fashion. And it was like, wow, this is crazy. But they would also have these really fun interviews in here. So when I opened it, and I thought, I should look at the articles and just familiarize myself with this outside of the programming. And I opened it up, and there's a picture of Erica Slezak, who played Vicky on One Life to Live, which is like my all-time favorite show. I watched it for 30 years. And I was like flabbergasted that I picked the one issue that she's got an interview in. And it was great because I don't know much about the actor herself. I just know about the character. And so it's the interview takes place like in her apartment with her husband, I think before they had kids.
Yeah, because they're talking about what their kids would be like.
Yeah, and
point.
It's so exciting for me because she has a daughter named Amanda in real life, and I always love that. And so who's blonde, by the way, because I know at the end of the article she says my kids better be blonde like me and not redheaded like my husband. Yeah. And it's hilarious because I believe her daughter ended up being blonde. But anyway, it gives a whole background on her life and her father, Walter Slezak, who was a famous actor at the time, and stuff about the soap and how she would sort of actually rewrite some of the lines of dialogue for her character, and that she was really a very strong woman, and it was great, and I was super excited about this. And also, soaps in 1978 were like ridiculously huge, but we hadn't hit quite the Luke and Laura on General Hospital period yet. But here is a pretty good example of like you could pick, and actually this is going to come full circle because here we are looking at a soap actor is important enough to put an entire article on in TV Guide about her because they've taken daytime very seriously here, and they're treating it like other forms of television that air at night, and they're giving it just as much credence. And that's interesting because although I haven't been to a grocery store since the pandemic hit, there was some brouhaha in the last couple of weeks because soap operas, the 4 soap operas that are remaining, I guess one was running because they shoot so far ahead, but the 3 that went on hiatus for the pandemic came back into production recently, and they all made the cover of the new TV Guide because they were the first to try out, can we continue production in this era? And that's the first time I think soap opera has been on a magazine like that in many, many years. And that was really exciting for me. And of course, I haven't gone to the grocery store, and I should have picked up the Young and the Restless issue, but I didn't.
I can get a copy for you.
Okay, thank you.
I'll source you a copy. Yeah, and to your point, so that's a nice little sort of cute character piece or sort of personal profile of her, and it's basically the first article in the issue, and then weirdly, a couple pages later, the next article is a big interview with Laurence Olivier.
That's right, which I didn't read, but I remember looking at that going, wow, that's crazy. Yeah,
she's getting top billing over Olivier, and it's sort of a very on-the-nose metaphor for the TV over movies here, because Olivier is doing Harold Pinter, I think, in a TV movie. So
that's right.
Why they're interviewing him. But yeah, it's interesting how the daytime TV stuff was generally treated much more, esteem's not the right word, but I feel like that really went away in the 90s when we got that glut of talk shows. That really killed anyone sort of talking about soaps. Soaps almost became like a cult phenomenon after that.
Yeah, there was a couple of things. It was Oprah supposedly killed. Well, I know she killed the after school special for sure. But because the after school special used to preempt the afternoon programming like once a month, but the Oprah was so popular that they stopped preempting things because people wanted Oprah more. But yeah, I think talk show television really killed it. And also the O.J. Simpson trials, because they would air the trial in the daytime. And so the soaps weren't airing. And then people kind of got caught up in sort of the reality television of, it was its own soap opera. And then people kind of dropped off the stories that were happening that were dramatic on the soaps and got kind of caught up in what was happening with O.J. And they were never able to rebound after that.
Yet another thing to hate OJ for. As if we needed more.
Yes.
So let's dive in here. What I don't know if you went night by night or you just went through some of the stuff that jumped at you, but what's the first thing you had?
Yeah, well, just to give you a precursor, because I'm going to talk about the TV movies that aired during the week, is to give just some context. There were 314 made-for-TV movies, miniseries, and specials that aired during the 1978 to 1979 season. Now, some of those are reruns, but that just goes to show the immense amount of production that was happening that wasn't just like weekly programming, outside of like Happy Days and Three's Company. That's like 314 whatever is just like...
And you mean newly produced, not even like old ones that were being rerun?
Well, some of them were being rerun, but that would compromise like the last maybe 10 or 15% of that 314. Most of it was new, and some of it was new stuff that reran that season too.
Wow.
So sometimes they would rerun things because they were so popular, and then they would end up sort of at the bottom. Usually the bottom 15% of the Nielsen's for the TV movie miniseries section was reruns. So when I talk about some of these programs, and I give you their Nielsen ratings and where they ranked for the year and for the week, I got the ratings for the week too. That you'll see that the TV movie.
You're awesome.
That's what I do. I like to add these little kind of tidbits because I think it helps people sort of understand how important the TV movie was in this era. So for Saturday, although I didn't choose it as, one of the programs I would pick, Rescue from Gilligan's Island aired at 9 p.m. that Saturday. And that was actually a two-parter, which I didn't fully realize. So I guess on the 14th of October, there was a Gilligan's Island special. And then there was like a conclusion to it, that Saturday. And that kind of blows my mind because I never considered Gilligan's Island as being a miniseries, but apparently at some point it was. And
this was the one with the Harlem Globetrotters and the robots? Am I remembering that correctly?
I don't really know because you know what? I didn't look it up. I just made a note of it. I know I've watched it. I think Rescue from Gilligan's Island is the one, and not to be too spoilery, but where they end up back on the island at the end, where they kind of come home.
Right.
And they've been on the island for so long that they're totally disorientated. And then they end up sort of crashing their boat again, and then Gilligan finds a sign that they had left behind, and he's like, "Hey guys, look what I found." And they're like, "Wah, wah." And you're like, "Oh my God, this is horrifying." And I think the Harlem Globetrotters came when they made Gilligan's Island a resort.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and that might be
robots. Robots playing against the Harlem Globetrotters.
I think so. Yeah, that's somebody should write a book about the Gilligan's Island movies because I think there's probably enough in there to be like, this is the craziest thing that ever happened on television. But it was actually a last-ditch effort for NBC to generate more viewers because at this point, I think it was the third highest, it was number 3 in the 3 networks. And so they I think they were trying to develop really highfalutin stuff, but they were also going lowbrow too if they could. And the lowbrow stuff, I think, worked because the first part, the one that's not in this TV guide, ended up becoming the number 5 highest rated TV movie to air that season with a 30.4/52. And I have a hard time understanding the ratings, but I think the 52 simply means like something like 52% of households with televisions were watching the first part of this Gilligan's Island special on the night it aired, which is half of America, right? So,
which is insane.
Yeah, it's completely insane. Part 2 kind of dropped in the ratings, although it did end up in the top 20. It came in at number 18 and then at number 60 for the season with a 21.5/40. So they were still getting good numbers, but I think after the first, people weren't that interested to see what happened to Gilligan afterwards. So
the thing that fascinates me about that too is we're also starting to see from the sort of mid 70s on, television starting to look back at itself for the first time, really. And so Gilligan's Island went off the air in 1968 or 69, something like that. But had become this perennial daytime rerun show and had a whole new built-in audience where now we started to see, and it was more prominent in the 80s, I guess, with like Return, I Dream of Jeannie Again and like those kind of things. But we started to see these sort of reunion movies and stuff like the Brady Kids having a variety show, 6 years after the Brady Bunch was off the air. That's sort of weird stuff like that.
Yeah, it was great. There was, I never seen the original series and I'm kicking myself for still not having caught up with it, but they did, I think the year before this, they did it was, Murder at Peyton Place. And they brought back most of the Peyton Place actors, but Mia Farrow and Ryan O'Neal had gone on obviously to become really famous. And I guess what they did was they killed their characters at the beginning. And then they made that the murder story. And then a lot of the cast came back. It's wild. And if you have never seen Peyton Place like myself, it's really wild because you really don't necessarily understand what's happening. But, Stella Stevens wears this wardrobe that is amazing. And it's crazy. But I think at the time, the actors thought it was really funny that they were killing the 2 people that would go on to be most famous. And it was sort of like a joke, I think, that people might appreciate if they're into Peyton Place. And then there was the Dragnet reunion movie that predates that even from the 60s, right? Mm-hmm. Where, before it led into the second series. So yeah, it wasn't until the 80s that it really hit big, but yeah, in the 70s, there was definitely like they're putting their, toes in the water to see if like these kind of things would take off. And they did really well. And reunion movies in the 80s were huge because of, if you think about Perry Mason and, The Return to Mayberry TV movie, those were the 2 highest rated TV movies on the season that they aired.
Return to Green Acres, I think, was in the 80s. The 70s, I think we also got, was Monsters Go Home a theatrical movie or was that a TV movie?
Oh, I don't know.
I don't know. But and also that really terrible Addams Family Halloween special from like 1978 or 79. And it's the original cast, but it just doesn't it's in color and on video, and it's just wrong.
Oh, I vaguely remember that. Yeah.
It is wrong in all ways, but we started seeing that it was weird to see these people who, you know, we saw on TV every day in their sort of frozen in time. And then you see them now, and obviously they're people, so they age and look different. It was shocking as a kid.
Yeah, it was in a way I really loved it. Like, Still to Beaver, which aired in like 83, was a really fascinating one because I don't know if you've seen it, but like Beaver's getting yeah, I love it too. Beaver's getting a divorce, which blows my mind. Like Beaver even like getting married is so weird to me. But what's so interesting about it is that Beaver wasn't living in Springville or whatever the name of the town was that they grew up in. And he came back and he had 2 kids. But Tony Dow's character, Wally, I think he married his high school sweetheart and he never really did much of anything. And he stayed in the town. I mean, he was successful in his town, but Beaver became the more adventurous of the 2. And I always thought that was a really interesting kind of point of character for them. And also Hugh Beaumont had just died and I thought it was a really nice tribute in the flashbacks to him to remember him. And they even has a little grave that they go to. And it's a very warm reunion film. So is Return to Mayberry. And I think when they hit the nail on the head like that, it's just like the best thing ever. It's such a comfort blanket.
Yeah, exactly. And the Still the Beaver led to the new Leave It to Beaver, which I think was TBS picked up, which was just as good as the movie. And it's a dramedy, basically. It's a single cam shot on film dramedy about sort of middle age in a lot of ways. And no one ever talks about it. And it's sort of what they tried to do with the Bradys in 1990, which was an absolute disaster.
Don't even say that. I love the Bradys, and I just recently acquired the entire series because they released this Bradys pack with the Brady Brides and the whole Bradys. And I'm a huge Brady Bunch fan, more so Robert Reed, I guess. And the Bradys, there's only like 5 episodes. Or something like that. Not
counting the Christmas one. I think there's 5. Yeah, right.
Yeah. And so I stopped at 3 because I'm so afraid to keep going because I don't want to finish it. And I know I watched the original run, but like, I don't remember a lot about it now except that Bobby in the car accident, like the basics. And so,
fake Cindy.
That's right. Well, fake Cindy's in the Christmas movie, but then it's fake Marcia. In the Bradys and, which is fine. It's Leah Ayres. She's in The Burning. I'll take it. But like, it's like, I don't want it to end. And I did the same with the Brady Brides. Like, I know I've seen all the Brady Brides, but I've stopped, like, they only made like 6 of them. And I've stopped at like number 4 because I'm like, I need this to come back to. I just need to have it here and know that there's something I haven't seen yet. And so, I probably would agree with you that the Bradys is not technically the best show that was ever created, but I love it. I love it. I love it.
It's jarring though, because it is. It's like a straight drama. Sort of.
It is. Yeah. Like the movie, the Christmas movie, the Brady, oh God, is it called?
A Very Brady Christmas.
It pretty much keeps in line with the original series, and does a really good job. And the Bradys kind of takes it somewhere else. And it's so bizarre because if you rewatch the pilot movie, it's like amazing because, Cindy becomes a DJ and, which is funny because she had that lisp, and I guess that's kind of the in-joke. And she decides to go to Bobby's car race where he gets paralyzed, right? And they have her sitting in the audience, and she's not doing anything correctly. She's like, there's all this dead air where she's just watching the race or talking to her parents. And then like Bobby gets in the car and then she's narrating the car accident. Oh, it looks like Bobby was in a car accident. Oh God, I think he's been hurt. So the car has been, you know what I mean? And there's like this whole 5-minute segment of that. And so it's weird, right? It's a weird show, but like, I don't know. Just seeing all of them together just makes me so happy.
That makes sense. I mean, and I think that was the whole point and seeing these people together again. But to me, it was just like this weird, it was like seeing the characters you like all of a sudden in the real world. Yeah. And you're like, no, it's too hard for them. Like they can't handle this. Put them back, And it reminds me of, did you ever see the show Hi Honey, I'm Home?
Is that the one? No, I haven't. It
was a really weird experiment that Nick at Night did. It was one of their first sort of original programming pieces. And they did it in conjunction with, I think, ABC. And so essentially the show was the Charmings or the Munsters, except the family was a 1950s TV Leave It to Beaver family that, for some, I forget why, but they exist in the real world all of a sudden. And they called it an instant rerun because it would air first on, I think, ABC on like a Sunday night, and then Nick at Night would air it on Monday night, the same episode. So they were like, it's an instant rerun. And the sort of premise of these, I guess it's like that movie, oh my God, what's the movie? And it has Reese Witherspoon in it, and Tobey Maguire and Don Knotts. Where they're black and white, and then they go, oh God, Somethingville, right? Yeah. I can't remember the name now, but yeah, Somethingville. It was sort of like that, but it was, it was a 3-camera multicam sitcom, but something about it just made me feel bad for them because it made less humor putting these people in that situation and more like, no, don't do that to them. Maybe that's just me. Yeah,
I'd have to see it, but that sounds amazing. I missed out on so much.
It was a cool show. It was probably 91 or 92. People hated it. I thought it was a brilliant idea. And it really was keeping in the tradition of so many sitcoms of that, out of place family kind of thing. But it's not well remembered. I think it was only 13 episodes, and it was like a summer run series. If you ever want to see it, I have it.
Does that predate the Brady Bunch movies that came out, like theatrically?
Yes, it does. Oh, those were 93, 94, I think.
That's kind of the same idea, isn't it? Like where they just dropped them in and everybody's like, wow, Greg Brady's a geek. And he thinks he's like this stud.
Yeah. And I love those Brady Bunch movies because
they're so good.
They managed to be... They pay tribute to the original while also kind of making fun of it in a nice, non-snarky way.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is real hard to pull off, and they do manage to do it. But man, now I want to rewatch all those. Anything else on Saturday you had?
Yeah, so I didn't pick Gilligan's Island, although I'm positive I must have watched that when it aired because I was so into Gilligan's Island. But my Saturday night as an adult would look like Rhoda, followed by Carter Country. Do you remember Carter Country?
No.
So I don't even remember the premise of the show now, but I remember it had an actor in it whose name, and I'm going to butcher it because I've never heard anybody say it out loud. His name was like Geech Kook, and he was in She's the Sheriff.
Yeah,
Gooch Kook. Okay, thank you. Because I've never heard anybody say his name, but he was in it, and I think it was about like a little town and sort of like maybe how the government ran in the town, because I remember that the mayor or somebody who had office there would always say, handling it? I'm handling it. Like kind of like a Ross Perot thing. Right. And it was the show I used to watch with my parents, and I feel like there was a black guy in it, a famous actor now, I can't remember who it is. Somebody famous, and I feel like maybe he's the fish out of water. I'm doing this all off memory. I don't really know because it never reran, but we loved it in my house, and we would watch it all the time. So I made a note of it, and then I put Love Boat, and followed by normally would be Fantasy Island, but the adult me who's in love with Dak Rambo would have to go for the short-lived series Sword of Justice, where he's like a mercenary or something like that. And I've watched the pilot, and it doesn't make a lick of sense, but I feel like in my memory there was 2 Dak Rambos, and if you've got 2 Dak Rambos, call me because 1 is already too much for me. 2 is amazing. And I was reading that in the pilot, because I don't remember the pilot, that Larry Hagman was the bad guy. And so that sort of is a precursor to when Dak Rambo was on Dallas.
Basically Zorro. It's sort of like Dak Rambo gets framed, in prison learns to be an amazing swordsman, and then comes out as like sort of a vigilante justice kind of thing, if I'm remembering correctly. This episode that's on that night, speaking of TV movies, the villain's played by Cameron Mitchell.
Oh, so good. So good. I always think of him when I think of TV for some reason on Charlie's Angels, because he would show up on there periodically.
Yes.
And not always the bad guy. There's one where he plays a heroin addict, and I think they're trying to get Kelly hooked on heroin.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, and he's the heroin addict that kind of helps her.
American Girls is on, which is a show I'm kind of fascinated by that I haven't been able to find any episodes of. And it had Deborah Klinger in it, who I love because I love Midnight Madness, and Priscilla Barnes, pre-Three's Company.
Love her.
And they're kind of Hardy Boys type shows, best I can tell. The pilot takes place in Cape Cod in a haunted house as well, which I've wanted to see forever. And in this episode, Don Johnson's in it.
Oh, well, he's coming up here, by the way, in this list.
So, nice.
Yeah, he showed up in all kinds of stuff then.
Which is weird, because this is 6 years before Miami Vice.
Yeah. Well, he was in 1980, right? I think it's 1980. He was in Revenge of the Stepford Wives, where he played Julie Kavner's husband.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And he shows up in little things like that, and he's so good in them.
Oh, man. Anything else on Saturday, or are we on to Sunday?
I think that once I got to Dak Rambo, I'd probably pass out from
I mean,
everything.
You can't take anything more after Dak Rambo. You need to recover.
No. Yeah, I'm done. I need a whole nother day to... So Sunday... I will tell you there were two movies. One was a theatrical, which was Final Chapter Walking Tall from 1977 with Bo Svensson as Buford Pusser. And yeah, I've never seen any of the Walking Tall movies. And I'm kind of angry about that. But there was another TV movie that aired, and I guess we'll talk about it when we get to my choices, but it was called Like Mom, Like Me, which starred Linda Lavin and Christy McNichol. And, I didn't watch it when it originally aired, but I'm a huge fan of it now. And I would like to talk a little bit about it when I get to it. So I'll just briefly go through my choices up till then. And I don't know if there's anything you want to comment on, but so I was a huge Hardy Boys fan. Parker Stevenson is like my ultimate crush. And I was in love with him as a kid. And it was also the show where I thought I wanted to be a detective. And it was never Nancy Drew, which is interesting. It was always the Hardy Boys, that I was drawn to. As a matter of fact, I think I didn't like Nancy Drew because her and Parker Stevenson, Pamela Sue Martin and Parker Stevenson's characters had like a maybe romance.
Yeah.
And I think it bothered me a lot.
Fair enough.
And so, yeah, I couldn't do it. But but now that I'm watching Nancy Drew as an adult, I really enjoy the show. But, it's interesting because, when I was a little kid, someone once told me, whatever you wanted to be as a kid is what you're going to become as an adult. And I always watched detective shows. And so I always thought I would become a detective, and then I became an archivist, which is not the same thing, but is the same thing. Yeah. Because there's a lot of research involved. And I always think about that when I think about the Hardy Boys. I think they got me on that road to, that kind of research intensive love or something.
I was very similar because I loved film noir, and I actually went and took the private detective classes when I was in college.
Really?
At a night school. And then before they ended, I was like, what the hell am I doing? This, because it's mostly just like, you film this guy who's on disability lifting things, or this guy cheating on his wife. There was no, it's not anything like a movie. But this episode of Hardy Boys is sort of the cliche quintessential episode. Like, if I was going to just write a fake Hardy Boys plot summary for a TV guide, I think I would write this exact thing. And it's Frank and Joe pose as archaeologists to investigate heroin smuggling in the Greek islands.
I'm pretty sure I just rewatched this one. I feel like this came in the last season when they kind of tried to change around the show and make it quote unquote sexier. And they had them doing like international kind of things. And so the third season is sort of, most Hardy Boy, fanatics don't like the third season. I love the third season because it kind of ups the glamour. And I think, and also having heroin on a kid's show is like really amazing to me. And so I think I actually prefer the third season over the first two. I think it was 3 seasons the series ran. And I'm actually really excited, and I can't imagine what 7-year-old me would have thought when I originally watched this. But, the age I am now, I'm super into it.
Yeah, I might watch that myself because they're all on Prime right now. All 3 seasons, I believe.
Oh, so good. So good. And then I picked Battlestar Galactica, which is a show that is still one of my all-time favorites. It was only like 1 season, I think, or something, right? Because they decided it was too expensive to produce the series. But it's such a gorgeous, beautiful show that, and I know they remade it, and I never saw the reboot, and I know people really like it, but it just is a testament to how strong the original series was, because I don't know that it was speaking to like a relevance in a way that I think the new Battlestar Galactica might have been, but it had a very timeless quality to it. And it was just wonderful.
It was, so the new one is very of its time. It's very dark and very 2000s. It is in the same continuity as the original one, which is pretty, it's clever how they did it, but couldn't be more different in tone. I had Jane Seymour on, and we were talking about, she's in the pilot. Yes. And she had zero interest in doing a series. And they had told her it was only going to be a made-for-TV movie. And when they told her they were going to do a series, she was like, no. So they had to reshoot her scenes and kill her with space cancer so that she was not in the series.
Oh man, space cancer. Well, that's tragic. I've seen the pilot movie in the theater twice. And, cause it played overseas theatrically. It's almost 3 hours long, and it's beautiful. Like I don't even know how much that pilot movie cost, but they sunk a lot into it. And it's so, every time it comes on, like MeTV plays Battlestar Galactica, and sometimes I'll fall asleep on the couch. They play it late at night, like on Saturdays, and the music will wake me up because it's so gorgeous and so lush. It's one of the best things I've ever seen, the pilot.
Did you watch Galactica 80?
I've seen parts of it, and I feel like, is it Kent McCord Barry Van Dyke?
Yeah, it's
okay.
like they were like, hey, everything about Battlestar Galactica people like, let's get rid of that. And because it's set on Earth in current time.
That's right.
And it's basically them hunting Cylons every episode, but like, it's like the Incredible Hulk. And it's really, really bad. But there's a Halloween episode two-parter that stars Wolfman Jack.
I don't think I've seen that.
Oh man, it's called Night of the Cylons, and it's sort of the classic cliche, oh, we're at a Halloween party, they think these Cylons are just people in costumes, and then they start killing everybody. And it's entertaining, but it is, as good as Battlestar Galactica is, this is awful.
Yeah,
Totally
it was on Hulu for a while, and so I went back to revisit it, and I will pretty much watch anything with Barry Van Dyke, anything. I have like a massive crush on him. So my boss had never heard of Barry Van Dyke for some strange reason, and I sent her a picture of him, I don't know, a couple months before the pandemic, and I just got an email back from her, and it just said, wow. I was like, yeah. Yeah, basically. So like, so I would watch anything, but I remember watching one episode of or Galactica 80 or whatever it's called, and thinking, yeah, I want to like this show, but it's just not doing it for me. And even in a kitschy value, it wasn't really like crossing over to me at all. But I do want to see the whole series. I feel like I need to.
It's probably worth doing once, but it is like someone was like, hey, this Star Wars kid's like, let's take Han Solo, make him a long haul trucker. But on Earth in 1979. Be like, I don't know if that's quite the same. No, it's fine. They'll love it.
Yeah, they love the characters. They'll be into it.
They won't even notice. Then did you go to the TV movie after that?
I did. So a little bit about Like Mom, Like Me. Now, I haven't seen this in a while, but this is a really amazing TV movie. And so we were talking about how TV movies could deal with relevant issues as they were happening, and also female-centric issues. So if you don't know anything about Like Mom, Like Me, it's about a woman played by Linda Lavin, who's been recently divorced. She's a housewife. And her and her daughter, played by Kristen McNichol, are sort of forced to go out on their own. And Kristen McNichol sort of becomes the mother figure as Linda Lavin's character kind of figures her way into the world. And it was it's based off a book that was written by a real life mother-daughter. I have the book. I've never read it, and I really need to. But there's an extra bit of poignancy to it because the daughter got some sort of cancer, and she died a few weeks before the movie aired. But I think she was around for the production of it. Yeah, and so when you watch the movie, because they were very close, and so it just adds this extra air of poignancy to it. It's a really, really good movie. It's dealing with, obviously, with divorces in the 70s were like a big thing, a lot of concern for people, especially women who had to sort of start all over again, but didn't have like any kind of work experience, and or anything like that. And also young girls and boys, who were living with these, broken homes with one parent. And so I think it handles the topic really well. And this, movie actually aired right after an airing of Alice. So it was kind of Linda Lavin night. And I thought that was really interesting programming. And Alice, was huge.
Enormous.
Yeah, and it's weird to think about now because I watched the show and I'm like, well, I don't know that it's that good of a show, but it was so really working class in a very organic, natural way that I think a lot of people really were drawn to it. Like if you remember, Mel Sharples lived in like a one-room apartment. He owned a restaurant and all he could afford was like a studio apartment. And the biggest, I think, apartment was owned by Alice because she had a kid. And even then it was only a one-bedroom and she slept on the couch. Yeah. And, that show really captured, I think, the experience of a lot of people. And I think people saw Linda Lavin, they saw themselves in that character, and so it was kind of an important series. So at the time, Kristen McNichol, I think Fox's was not Fox's,
Little Darlings.
Little Darlings was about to come out or had come out. And she had acquired a $1 million contract to do 5 TV movies for CBS, which must have been enormous at that time, $1 million. So this was the first one. Then she did The Summer of My German Soldier, then something called My Old Man, which aired in 1979. And then in 1980, she did Blinded by the Light, which is the 4th. And I don't know that she did a 5th. I couldn't find one, but Blinded by the Light is, about cults. And Jimmy McNichol plays her real life brother in it, and he gets inducted into a cult, and it's about her trying to get him out of the cult. And it's basically about deprogramming. And I recently wrote about it for a book called Scared Sacred, because they deal with it in a really, conservative way, but they also ask a lot of questions about the cult that are really important. Like why is he a member of the cult? Like, I think it's asking questions that it's not just glossing over it, but the deprogramming is very controversial because at the time there was a guy whose name I can't remember, but I wrote about him in the essay for Scared Sacred, where he was like literally kidnapping and torturing people to deprogram them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a really big deal. And so this movie takes a very vanilla look at it. I think it asks the right questions, but then it handles it in a very like, no, it's okay to deprogram sort of way. And so it's kind of a fascinating film. So that was the last of the CBS films she did. And then Linda Lavin would also go on to make several movies in this era for CBS. She did the $5 20-cent Hour Dream, A Matter of Life and Death, and something called Another Woman's Child, which are all straight dramas. And I don't know much about those. But this was a big movie for them and probably launched Linda Lavin's TV movie career at the point. So it was actually a top 10 rated show for the week. And it aired, and it came in at number 20 for the season. So it was actually a really big TV movie on the night that it aired.
Yeah, I mean, Sunday night, this would have been appointment television. And to your point, from Alice leading into it, probably the entire Alice audience stuck around, I imagine. And Linda Lavin, also on The Good Wife, by the way.
Okay, you're selling me.
Yeah. Also in this made-for-TV movie, Max Gayle is in it, who people would know from Barney Miller, and Stacey Nelkin, who people may know from Halloween 3 as the romantic lead.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, Max Gayle is, she has, Linda Lavin's character has two boyfriends in it. And, Max Gayle is like, the hunkier of the two. And I can't remember the actors who plays the first one. He's really good. He plays this professor. He always plays jerky characters, and he's a jerky character in this as well. And it's like a very realistic look at like, I just turned 40. I have a teenage daughter, and now I'm supposed to get a job and start dating. What the hell am I supposed to do with my life? And then where do I go? And it handles it really well. And if people are interested, if that's like a topic of interest for them, I think like Mom Like Me does it in a way that I think it's very important, and people should seek it out if they can.
Oh, cool. I'll try to hunt that down. Anything else on Monday? On Sunday,
nope. I'm tapped out. Once you get Max Gayle, it's going to be like Cute Boys every night. There's going to be some crush that shows up. Yeah, because Max Gayle is like really hunky in this. Once you get Max Gayle on my TV screen, I just have to sit back and just let it happen. And so I was done for the night.
It's funny because Max Gayle would get, not typecast, but he would play sort of a conservative dumb guy in a lot of stuff. Yeah. And he is one of the most radical left-wing in the best way, really smart guys.
Yeah, he's fabulous.
It's just amazing. I've talked to Max about doing this show. Hopefully I'll have him on at some point. But he couldn't be more different from the character. I mean, his characters are always, even if they're sort of conservative or not necessarily the bad guy, they still sort of are likable and nice because that he's like that.
Yeah, he's got a presence that's like, it just... When I was a kid, I would watch Barney Miller, and I already had like a massive crush. I had a crush on everybody on Barney Miller, I guess, but like, maybe even Jack Sue, who knows? But he just has like this presence. There's certain actors that there's just something about them that's so magnetic that you can't even like understand how the TV screen can contain it. And I feel like Steve Landesberg also had that. There's something about them that just draws you to them. Yeah. It's just something that they exude. And so I don't know how much of it is like, he's always a very talented actor, but some of it too, I think is just Max Gayle, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't doubt that. So Monday, what'd you do?
Well, I picked WKRP because that was a show that I watched incessantly as a kid, and I still love it as an adult. And then I didn't have anything between 8:30 to 9 because I couldn't find anything that looked interesting to me. But then Tuesday night came Katie, Portrait of a Centerfold, starring Kim Basinger, which is a TV movie that I remember loving when I first saw it. And I was finally able to catch up with it again to prepare for this. And now Don Johnson's in it. He has a small role as one of Katie's roommates. So Kim Basinger plays this sort of like Texas beauty queen who wins this contest, and she wins just enough money to move to LA to pursue an acting career. And for Katie, it's not really so much about whether or not you can act. It's that she's a really pretty girl and she wants to become famous. She wants to become somebody, right, from the small town. And so she goes, and Melanie Mayron is this girl that she used to know in Texas who's now moved out to LA, and she's a magician, which is really interesting because you don't see a lot of female magicians even now. And she moves in with her, and Don Johnson is Melanie Mayron's boyfriend. And they all live together with, Terry Nunn from Berlin, who, did a lot of TV in the 70s.
A ton. She was in a really great episode of, James at 15 as sort of a girl with a reputation.
She was in also a Lou Grant where she plays a girl on death row, and Rossi tries to campaign to get her off of death row through, his news reporting. And she's actually is like, no, I actually want to pay for my crime. And it's like this really amazing, like last season or something episode. And she's amazing in it. And she was also in Georgia Peaches. Did you ever see that TV movie? Yeah.
Yep. And she was in the, is it Radio City that she's in, which is not a made for TV movie, but it's sort of like these two teenage girls are trying to get into like this radio contest thing, and it's at like a roller disco, and it's real weird.
Sounds great
Radio
though.
City. I think it might be called Radio City, but she was a great actor, and it's funny how she totally abandoned that when Berlin got huge.
Yeah, she's amazing. I've seen Berlin like 4 or 5 times in concert. I just love them. And so anyway, she's another one of the roommates. She plays a girl who had a kid at 14, and now she's got this like 6-year-old kid, and they all live in this apartment. And so it's sort of, she's trying, Katie, played by Kim Basinger, is trying really hard to like make her way, but nothing's coming for her except this offer to do a centerfold for this magazine. And so she acquiesces and she ends up doing it, and it changes her life in good and bad ways. And it's, I guess, oh my God, why can't I remember his name? I just was watching him on Match Game yesterday too. He's in Polyester, is that the one? Tab Hunter.
Oh yeah, Tab Hunter, yep.
Yeah, Tab Hunter's in, and he's really good. He's like this kind of jerky playboy guy who like sleeps with all the playmates in this magazine, and she just can't get a break, and so it just kind of follows her life. And Judith Crist, we didn't talk about Judith Crist, but Judith Crist used to review all the movies in TV Guide, and at the time, so now Leonard Maltin released some books where they have TV movie reviews in them, but Judith Crist was really the person who covered as much as she could. Because she got the screener she wrote for TV Guide, and she was this invaluable resource, even though she often didn't like a lot of the TV movies that were coming through. Sometimes the only information you could get about the films were through her reviews. And she actually really liked this film. She didn't love it, but she liked it, and she thought that Kim Basinger lent an air of authenticity to the part because she was a model, I think, right before she became an actress.
And I think she was a former Miss Texas or wherever she's from. North
possibly.
Carolina? Yeah.
Yeah, possibly. And the thing about Kim Basinger is, I think I have mixed feelings about her as an actress, and not so much that I don't think she's a good actress, but I think she did a lot of stuff that maybe didn't interest me. But her early work, when she was first starting out, like she did a TV movie called Killjoy, which was then changed to The Murder of Joy Morgan. She's so good in that. And she did a theatrical called Hard Country with Jan Michael Vincent and Michael Parks. And it was directed by a guy who predominantly did TV movies named David Green. He did some of the episodes of Roots. He did a lot of stuff with Levinson and Link. And she's really good in that. And there's something about early 80s Kim Basinger that I'm becoming slowly obsessed with. So it was really great to revisit her because she's so good in this. And this is like a legit good movie. Like, it's salacious, Speaking of TV, Blind Date, which is John Larroquette and I think Willis's first movie. She's great in that too. Yeah. This early part of her career is just, I'm so charmed by her in these films. Yeah, I love Blind Date. Now, it's been years since I've seen it, but that was a movie that I remember watching over and over again as a teenager because it was just so hysterical. And she's a lot of fun in it. And so anyway, this was a really good movie, and it did really well in the ratings. It came in at number 14 for the week. It got a 22.7/34, and then it came in at number 41 for the season. And so I know a lot of people turned in because it was super salacious, but I think what they got out of it was actually a really decent film.
There's a couple of like centerfold, like wasn't Jamie Lee Curtis in a made-for-TV movie about like a Playboy centerfold? She did
Death of a Centerfold, which is about Dorothy Stratton.
Dorothy Stratton, right. So it's like the TV version of Star 80, basically.
Yeah, and actually Peter Bogdanovich in his book, The Killing of a Unicorn, which is about Dorothy Stratton, he said that he prefers the Jamie Lee Curtis version. He thought that she captured her better. I don't know about, I think Star 80 must be a very difficult watch for him. And I would think Death of a Centerfold would be too, but I think I think of the two, he preferred it. And I don't know either one well enough to compare. I have seen both, but it's been so long. But there was also I Married a Centerfold with Terry Copley.
Oh, right.
Yeah, which is pretty good. And then there's another
cop too.
Policewoman Centerfold is great. Yes. It's great. It's on Amazon Prime right now. I can't even recommend that movie enough. And that one's based in fantasy though. So it's based on a true story about a woman who was a member of a small town police force who did Playboy and got suspended, and she fought them and got her job back. And they made it into this TV movie, but they really romanticize everything, including like she gets called by I think they're called Centerfold Magazine, and she gets this call and they're like, you get final say. And if you decide at the end, you can pull the photos photos and we support you. And then she goes to do the shoot, and this photographer, he's based on a real life Playboy photographer. I'm forgetting his name. He's really not sleazy. Not that I'm saying the Playboy photographers are sleazy, but there's nothing sleazy about it. And the montage of the photo shoot is really romanticized, and it's really like how she becomes like more comfortable with her body during the shoot is kind of what they're doing. So it's like this transformation she has, and it's really a flight of fancy, but it's wonderful. And every time Ed Marinero plays the love interest in that, speaking of having your crush for the night, but like, it's just so well done, and it's got this happy ending, and it's like this really great sort of, you keep using the term comfort blanket, but it's one of those movies you watch and you just kind of let them do the driving. And it's of the Playboy centerfold type movies, that one's probably my favorite. And then there's one called Shattered Innocence, which is about a porn star based off of Shauna Grant, who was a real life porn star who committed suicide. And they made a TV movie about her, and the parents, this was in like 87 or 88 maybe, the parents, sold the rights to her story, supposedly to buy their daughter a headstone, because they were really not rich at all. And they were very upset with the TV movie, but I think it's a really good TV movie. I think the problem the parents had is that they don't blame the porn industry for Shauna Grant's death.
Right.
And I think they really wanted to place the blame on somebody. And the TV movie takes a really pretty unbiased look at Shauna Grant's life.
If I recall that movie, it's not exactly like Hardcore with George C. Scott, but it sort of has a similar message when she's like, yeah, no, I wanted to do this. Like, it's not, because that whole movie, he's convinced she's been kidnapped and forced to do these things.
Right.
And it's kind of like, no, that, maybe it was a bad idea, but that was just,
Well, yeah, like Shauna Grant in real life, I guess she hooked up with this coke dealer, and she was living with him, and then he got arrested and they froze his assets, and then a lot of stuff happened, and that sort of was working its way towards the end of her life. And in the movie, John Plachette, is that his name, from Not Signing Plays?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, he plays the coke dealer, and he's actually a little sympathetic. And the characters, like her best friend works in porn, and she's a really good person. And it's like, it's really interesting that the way they do that, they're not victimizing her that way. And I really appreciate it, but I'm sure for the parents it was horrifying.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. I just imagine them reacting like George C. Scott did.
Yeah, that's my daughter.
Yeah. And his daughter's like, no, this is my thing. And they're like, no. Yeah. If I think of like it was that movie Children of the Night from 84.
Oh, yeah.
About the Hollywood runaway. I mean, that's what I would expect that to be, not what they give us in that Shauna Grant movie.
Yeah, it's really brave when you think about it, because it's doing a lot of things that I don't know if it's realistic. They did like a Dateline on her that's really good, and I think in that one too, she's not necessarily depicted in a good light. And I don't think she was a bad person, but I mean, I think that she wanted certain things and maybe was too young and too naive to really understand what she wanted and the way to go about it. And Dateline kind of presents it that way, I think. She's fascinating to me.
It's a complicated, she was one of the first ones that there was a lot of mainstream attention for her. And then was it Savannah, I think, was the other suicide in the 90s that there was a lot of mainstream attention for as well. Partly because I think it lived up to the tragic end that a lot of people not want to see for people in the fringier parts of Hollywood, but that they sort of expect, or it fell into the narrative of that sort of thing. But they were really sort of sad, fascinating, in a lot of ways, very typical Hollywood stories. I mean,
I agree with that. Yeah, absolutely.
They're not really that different from the sort of, innocent girl comes in from Idaho on the bus to Hollywood to make it. And it's just, slightly different dressing, obviously. But speaking of horrible ends that people have in made-for-TV movies, did you see that the made-for-TV movie The Donner Pass, The Road to Survival, is on?
I did. So when we get to Tuesday, there were two movies that aired. There's Papillon, which is a theatrical, obviously, and then Donner Pass, The Road to Survival, which I'd never heard of. But on my notes, I wrote, Andrew Prine, Robert Fuller, and Mike Callan, Lance Legault, and I put 3 exclamation points. And then I went on Amazon and I bought the VHS of it because I've never seen it. And if you got Andrew Prine and Robert Fuller in a movie, first of all, if you have Robert Fuller in anything, so he was Dr. Brackett on Emergency for people who aren't familiar with him. I can't even blew my mind. All the boys I've had crushes on all my life are in this one movie together, and they're going to eat each other. So like, this has got to be the most amazing thing that's ever aired on television. So I'm super excited. Yeah. So that I was one of the reasons why I loved that you invited me on the show is going through this TV guide is I made tons of notes about things that I haven't seen yet that I have to seek out. And this was definitely on the top of my list. With Katie underneath, and there's one other movie we'll talk about here coming up. But so Judith Crist actually liked this movie too. Now I don't think she loved it, but she said that because it was based on such a harrowing true story, she said it was easier to quote overlook the staginess, the superficialities, and the contrivances end quote of the film. It didn't do super well. It came in at number 40 for the week with a 16.5/27. And so number 40 for the week. So this is the time when we only had 3 networks. There were only like 60 TV shows airing that week. So number 40 is not great. But there were still, if you're thinking about 27% of the audience, right, watching, that's a huge amount of people still.
Oh, yeah. That's millions, tens of millions of people. But it makes sense. I mean, it's 1978. You can watch a TV movie about Kim Basinger being a centerfold, or you can watch a movie with a bunch of dudes eating each other in 1800s Utah. And, you know, not everyone's like you and I.
Yeah, take me back. Where's my time machine? Because I'm ready. I'm ready for this. But so my picks for Tuesday ended up being Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley because that was Tuesday. But I decided to skip Three's Company, which I obviously didn't do when this originally aired because I don't remember watching this movie. And I picked Donner Pass because this would have been my everything, I think, when it originally aired, because I would have been like 7, I guess. And I'm sure it's not as
salacious.
Yeah, visceral as I'm thinking it's going to be, but
erotic.
Erotic and beautiful and wonderful. But I feel like my 7-year-old mind would have made it really amazing. So like, I can only imagine what it would have been like to watch this then. And so, there is not a horror movie. It's weird because, you know, as we're going through this, we're really close to Halloween, but there wasn't a lot of Halloween stuff airing this week.
No, it's strange. I wonder if they're just saving it all for the week after, or what. But I do want to mention too, in that Donner Party movie, Royal Dano is in it, who people might know from House 2, the second story, or he's the guy in Killer Clowns from Outer Space who first gets killed by the clowns. And my favorite role that he did, he plays kind of the same guy and everything, but he is the lightning rod salesman in Something Wicked This Way Comes.
Oh my gosh.
And he is always kind of amazing when he shows up and stuff. And he was an old cowboy actor. I think he did a lot of Westerns in the 50s. And he doesn't get enough. I would have liked to have seen him in more sort of starring roles. Like, I don't know if you've seen House 2, which is sort of a silly sequel, but he's really good in it. And it's weird how he manages to play. He plays a 200-year-old zombie prospector who's the good guy.
That's awesome.
But he makes it a real character who's really sympathetic, and that's not an easy thing to pull off.
You know, I've seen House 1 and 2, but like I was a teenager, and so I only have the vaguest recollections of them now, but I really should go revisit it.
House 2 is one of my favorite. First of all, calling House 2 the second story is one of the most brilliant taglines I've ever heard in my life for a movie. But one of the things they did was George Wendt was in the original one. So to kind of keep the Cheers cast going piece, they have John Ratzenberger in the second one.
That's right. I remember that.
And the joke is he's like a handyman that doesn't bat an eyelash when they're like, oh, our house is possessed and the room's going to alternate dimensions and there's monsters. And he's just kind of like, oh yeah, I know what to do with that. And that, ever since I was a kid, has fascinated me, where I realized that if we lived in a world with monsters and magic and all that stuff, the people who would know what to do would not be like fanciful wizards or like David Copperfield magicians. They'd be like plumbers. They'd be mechanics. They'd be people who know, you know, manual stuff like, oh, you need to get rid of some zombies. Let me look at, oh yeah, these are 86s. You got to, you know, like they would know that kind of stuff. And I've never seen that depicted in anything except for this John Ratzenberger character. And I so want to see that movie just with like these blue collar, basically plumbers who take care of like magical issues.
I would love that too. It made me think it's not quite the same, but it kind of made me think of The Frighteners because like, he's such a flawed character. You know, he's dealing with so many things and it just kind of happens that he has this ability and nobody really takes him seriously and at the beginning because of the type of person that he is. And he's just this kind of guy that just has this ability, you know, and it's kind of cool.
Yeah. And he's legitimately doing the thing that he is hired for, although a little bit, he's got a little bit of scam going on.
That's right.
With the other ghosts. But yeah, it's that kind of thing where it's not this glamorous thing or like a super scientist like Ghostbusters, because that's not who fixes things. That's not, I'm always in awe when like a carpenter shows up and fixes your steps or something, because I'm so not handy and can't do anything. So I always imagine where he's like, oh yeah, that's goblins. I'll take care of it.
That's how they'd handle it.
Yeah, that's how they'd handle it. Like it's raccoons under your porch or something. I
hope someone's listening because I want to see that movie too.
I do too, and Ratzenberger is great in House 2. House 2 is underrated. Ari Gross is in it, who's great. Unfortunately, Bill Maher is in it, but he plays a real jerk. Amy Yazbek's in it, and it's really good.
I love her.
It's a fun movie, and there's a puppy. There's a super cute creature that is a combination of a puppy and a caterpillar.
Oh,
and it's
maybe
cute.
I haven't seen this because I don't think I remember anything that you're describing.
Oh man, there's like crystal skulls, and there's the villain is this like old west dead like evil guy with like the big old west mustache, but he's like this zombie, and it's a pretty cool movie. To be honest with you, I kind of love that movie, and I love the original House. But the Vietnam stuff in the original House is a little over the top for me, and this one doesn't have that.
Awesome, yeah, I do. That's what I remember about the first one. I feel like Bull from Night Court is in one of them.
Yes, he's in the first one. He plays. Okay. So in this one, it's William. It's a lot of TV people actually. William Catt stars in it, the Greatest American Hero, and George Wendt, and he moves back into his house where his kid drowned when he was married. He's like a Stephen King type author, and it turns out that his buddy from Vietnam, who's played by Richard Mall, who William Catt is responsible for this guy dying in Vietnam, basically, is haunting him and has sort of orchestrated all this stuff from beyond the grave to get revenge against him. And Richard Mall is unrecognizable. He's in tons and tons of makeup, but he's really terrifying. But it's a little bit too much Vietnam for me in that one. Or it just seems a little like inorganic. Like they've just glommed Vietnam into this thing because it was 1985.
Yeah, I think wasn't the tagline "Too much Vietnam"?
Yeah, I think that's what it was exactly called. It was like Nam Overload. That's what it was called. Richard
Lots
Mall,
of Vietnam.
Nam. Yep. Too much is never enough.
I was just glad you mentioned the Prospector because Donner Pass is clearly a Western, but there was another Western we'll get to. It aired this week, but Westerns are like a thing you don't necessarily see so much, but TV was really heavily ensconced in them, mostly in the 60s. But then there was some 70s TV movie Westerns. I'm thinking of Black Noon in particular, and this one, and then the other one we're going to talk about, and a couple other ones. There was one, I can't remember the name of it now, but it's in my book. Somebody reviewed it. It had, it was like 3 women. And what was that movie that came out with Madeline Stowe and Drew Barrymore?
Bad Girls.
Yeah, everybody says that this TV movie inspired Bad Girls. And now I can't remember the name of it. Wild Women, I think, was the name of it. And so, like, Westerns were still really prevalent on television, even though I think they were dying out in the theatrical. And I don't know enough about the Westerns to actually know if that's true, but I feel like they weren't as prevalent in
They
theaters.
definitely weren't. I think it's the same phenomenon that with the reunion movies, in that you're now seeing people who grew up on the Brady Bunch in the 60s or Westerns in the 50s and 60s are now in their 30s, and they're trying to program stuff for them. So they're doing stuff like Western made for TV movies that's sort of a nostalgia trip, and also is feeding into the sort of rural Southern shows that were popular at the time too. So they sort of have that hee-haw, sort of Little House on the Prairie, even Dukes of Hazzard a little later. So it was kind of bridging the gap between those two things.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree with that. I don't know enough about the TV movie Westerns. I'm hoping to cover them on my show here soon. I found somebody who's actually really into Westerns, and I thought, he'll be perfect to get some background, because I just don't know. My parents used to watch spaghetti Westerns, and it actually ended up turning me off of Westerns because everybody looked so dirty and gross. And so when I was a kid, I was like, I can't watch this. Nobody bathes. I'm just really uncomfortable watching it. And so I never ended up getting into Westerns, but it was on all the time at our house.
Yeah, I mean, it was the prominent genre. And in a lot of ways, the format of the Westerns continued on, but the trappings of the Western went away. So like Star Trek is a Western. It's wagon train.
Yeah.
It's the same premise. Or even stuff like Incredible Hulk or The Fugitive or Route 66, that sort of, they basically are the same exact format as the Westerns in the 50s, but they're just in modern times. It's the same kind of almost anthology, a case of the week kind of thing without being a detective show. And they kind of realized that they didn't have to spend all this money to have it be set in period. That was my thing as a kid. Anything that took place before electricity, I was like, boring.
Isn't that funny? When I was a kid, my brother would tease me. The Waltons would come on in the afternoon, and he was like, I'm going to make you watch the Waltons. And for whatever reason, that was like a fate worse than death for me. So I was like, oh, no, don't put on the Waltons. And then the Waltons started playing on TV Land when I was like in my late 20s or something, early 30s, maybe, living in LA. And I became addicted to it. And now I have like every episode. But as a kid, it just seemed like it was going to be so agonizing to watch, like and my mom would make me watch Little House on the Prairie because she loved the books, and it was like pulling teeth to get me to sit there and watch it.
It just is something about it's so slow and boring, and I wonder if I'd like them now if I revisited it. But it was just like, why? There's nothing happening.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what it was for me. But now, I guess the drama comes through more for me as an adult. But The Waltons is like one of my all-time favorite shows now, so it's just kind of funny that that's how it worked out. And that might segue us into Wednesday, because we were going to talk about another show that I really love.
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay, so there were 2 TV movies that aired this night. There was The Grass is Always Greener Over the Septic Tank, which ran on CBS, which was based off an Irma Bombeck novel. And although I don't remember the movie, I'm 99% positive I must have watched it, because I was a huge Irma Bombeck fan when I was a kid. I just loved her, and her books were really accessible for young people. Like the humor somehow translated to me, even though I was just a kid. And I don't know much about her now, which is funny, and I should revisit her. But it was huge because it starred Carol Burnett and Charles Grodin, and Judith Crist didn't care for the movie, but she thought that the actors were great in it, and that's what made it worth watching. It was huge. It came in number 7 for the week with a 23.9/39, and number 28 for the season. That's out of 314 TV movies, so that's pretty spectacular. It ran against Desperate Women, which starred Dan Haggerty, Susan St. James, Ronnie Blakely, and my girlfriend Ann Dusenberry from Jaws 2. I worship her. And that ran on NBC. That one didn't do so well. It came in at number 48 for the week with a 14.9/24. Which landed it at number 204 for the season. So while I was researching this, and I don't know if you saw it on my Twitter, I found the German video box cover.
Yes.
And it's basically 2 naked women wrestling, and Susan St. James in a bra that barely fits, with like these heaving bosoms coming out, and Dan Haggerty in the corner just hanging out with these naked people. And I looked at it, and so now I haven't seen Desperate Women, but it did send me over to Amazon, because I'm like, okay, I have to see how this compares to this video box. But it sells for like $101 on VHS.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, and so I was like, no. But the VHS American video box art is much more accurate, I think, to the film. It's like sepia toned with like Dan Haggerty's face, Yeah,
and Dan Haggerty was huge at this time because he was on Grizzly Adams. So,
yeah.
And so he was playing a very Grizzly Adams type character, I imagine. He was always in Battle of the Network Stars, like you would think on paper. And I think Ronnie Blakely had already been nominated for an Oscar by this point. People would know her as the mom in the original Nightmare on Elm Street. But this, the way they advertise it in here as deserters, dry gulchers, government gold, and desperate women. Benjamin Ward was riding herd over 3 women. That is just a phrase I never want to hear.
Oh my goodness.
Riding herd over 3 women convicted of embezzlement, armed robbery, and attempted murder. But the gang that was chasing them made them look innocent by comparison. Yeah, yikes.
Yeah, it's a lot of yikes there. So, so at the end of Judith Crist's review for Desperate Women, she wrote, "Let the participants be nameless out of compassion."
I think I'm going to agree with her on this, not having seen it, because that sounds like it. Yeah, yikes. I remember, and this may be a false memory, but I remember The Grass is Always Greener Over the Septic Tank. I feel like it aired on HBO a bunch when I was a kid. I feel like there was about 7 movies with Charles Grodin that were just on during the day all the time. And this one I remember because Alex Rocco is in it. And I was
Yes, he is. That's right.
Obsessed with Alex Rocco as a kid because I don't know how much you know about Alex Rocco, but he was a mob guy here.
Oh.
And he had to move to Los Angeles to get away from that stuff after he went to jail. And his dad was childhood friends with Leonard Nimoy.
Wow.
So, who's also from here. So he said, go out there and, Leonard will set you up. And he took Leonard Nimoy's acting class. And it's a whole long story, but he basically lied his way into getting a part on Batman 66 and then became an actor and all this other stuff. But he was usually cast as like a guy from New York, even though he had the most broad Boston accent in the history of the world. Played Joe's dad on Facts of Life.
That's right.
But he popped up in a bunch of made-for-TV movies, and he was in a TV series, it might have even been this year, called 3 for the Road. And it was him, I forget who played the sons, but he was this divorced dad, and him and his 2 kids were driving in a camper van cross-country. That was the show.
Well, that sounds like a lot of because I was looking at the TV teletype or the TV updates, one of those sections, and they were talking about Lucan was on hiatus. And Lucan is just one guy. It's like the Incredible Hulk, but it's like you were talking about the Westerns where people travel around and meet people. Mm-hmm. And I'm guessing that's what 3 for the Road was, where it's sort of an adventure for them, and they just meet different people in different places.
Yeah, which is, in hindsight, is probably like a pretty expensive show, but was really a staple show. Like if you look at a show like a little bit later than this, The Master with Lee Van Cleef and another Van Patten, that was the same thing. It was him and I think it was, which Van Patten was it in that one?
It was, oh my gosh, he's not even the son, he's a brother, but he's much younger, I think. Yeah. Oh my God, why can't I know there's Nils? I can name all of the sons.
Yeah.
Vincent,
I've met Nils. Oh
my God.
Yeah, Nils is married to Nancy Vallon, who was in Saved by the Bell. She was the nurse. She was on Baywatch and a bunch of other things. And I had Nancy on last March, and I was out in LA. And the place I was renting had chickens for some reason. And they got out of the pen, and Nils was kind of hanging around because I was interviewing Nancy, and he's like, "Oh man, these chickens got out." And so I texted the lady who owned the place, and she's like, "Oh yeah, no thanks, your friend rounded up the chickens for me." I was like, "Oh yeah, just one of the Van Pattens rounded up your chickens."
Yeah, I know. Oh my God, that's so cool. I'm so jealous. I love the Van Pattens.
Yeah, it was. He has agreed to do an episode at some point, so I'll get a lot of good Van Patten stories. But yeah, it was the same Van Patten I think that was in Class of 1984.
He was, and he might have been in the Young Warriors. Is that the same one?
Yeah, the one from the White Shadow. He was in the White Shadow as well.
Yeah. Oh, I feel bad because I just did I have the Master on Blu-ray. And I just watched like all of them. I wrote a review of it for Diabolique, and it was really fun for me to revisit it because of all the famous people that people before they got famous, right? Demi Moore and the girl from Wings, who's Crystal Bernard.
Crystal Bernard. Yep.
And even George Lazenby shows up in an episode.
Yeah, Helen Hunt, there's that show's fun, and the Blu-rays look amazing.
Yeah, I know, it's so amazing. It's such a weird, I have this daughter that I don't know exists. Lee Van Cleef says, and then so I've got to find her, but there's these ninjas chasing me because I left the Order of Ninja or whatever,
and I have a shuriken in my spine.
And Shogashugi is chasing him.
Yes, who was in all the ninja movies from Canon. And that was a weird show. They spent a lot of money on that show too, which is kind of strange.
Yeah, it ran against a show that I've never it ran with the show that I've never been able to find called The Legmen with Oh my God, what's the name of the actor? He's been nominated for an Oscar. He was in Malibu Bikini Shop. That's what I remember him most from. David Green, Bruce Green, Bruce Green.
And then the other actor he's in Chopping Mall. He's the kind of smarmy guy that he does a lot of writing and directing now. I can't remember his name. Yeah, but there were two like sort of like yuppie sort of detective. It was like a comedy detective show.
Yeah, it was like Riptide, and it was like it was interesting because the Master and Legman were actually like a shot that the network was taking, whichever network produced those shows, to actually move out of the 18 to 49 female demographic and try to get more men watching. And I think shows like Riptide and Magnum PI were the impetus for it. And so they were looking at creating like very male-centric action shows with this new demographic in mind. And those shows didn't take off. Riptide did pretty good. Obviously Magnum, which is like my favorite primetime show of all time.
Simon and Simon.
Yeah. Like all those were like, and those always existed, but I think that there was like more awareness on the networks that there was like this demographic that they were interested in. So whether or not it carried over to all those shows, Legman and The Master were actually part of this new programming scheme that kind of bombed for that channel.
I think it was NBC because I think they were Tartikoff shows, and I think Miami Vice was the thing that ended up being what they wanted with those shows, if I'm remembering correctly. I have a couple of episodes of Legman. I'll upload them for you. I think I have 2 episodes. Not to be confused with Leg Work, the female detective show from 1988.
I used to love that show. Was that the one? No, there's 2. There was one with Riley Bertinelli, and then there was one with Mary Kay Place. Is that her name, or Mary? Oh, the girl from Duet.
Yes. Those were different shows too. That Legwork was, what the hell was her name? She isn't Elizabeth Perkins, but she looks like Elizabeth Perkins.
I'm positive I watched it.
There was also one with Lonnie Anderson and Linda Carter.
That's Partners in Crime.
Partners in Crime, which was, I really liked that as well.
That's a great show.
Yeah, and then there was one I think was just a TV movie, but they meant it as a pilot, which was Marky Post, and I want to say Cindy Williams.
There was one called Velvet.
Not Velvet. This was like Marky Post is like a prostitute.
Oh, I have that movie.
And Cindy Williams.
Tricks of the Trade.
Yes, that's it. Yeah. Yep. And they team up to. Also, total side note. Recently, in the last year, probably. People have uploaded super rare stuff to YouTube, and YouTube has just left it alone. And I'd say even in the last 6 months, there's about 150 unsold pilots that I have never been able to find that were always just legendary that people have just uploaded to YouTube.
Yeah, we came across, do you remember Struck by Lightning, which aired in like 73 with Jeffrey Kramer and Jack Elam? The pilot is on YouTube now. And I don't normally promote YouTube, but when that came out, I mentioned it on my podcast because there's only 3 episodes of that show. And I am like madly in love with Jeffrey Kramer. And I've been looking for that show for decades, and then it just popped up one day.
Yeah, it's super rare stuff and there's one that was, speaking of House and House 2, this was actually written and directed by Steve Miner, who did both those movies, and it's called B-Boys, and it's about it's an action comedy. I think it's from 88. And Dave Thomas also wrote it with him. And it's about these 2 high school kids in LA that become bounty hunters at night.
Oh my God, what's it called again?
It's called B-Boys for Bounty Boys.
Oh my God, that sounds amazing.
It's really funny and weird and has a very strange sense of humor, but some really good action scenes as well. And it's the only other thing I've seen. I'm blanking on her name. She plays Cookie in One Crazy Summer, if you've ever seen One Crazy Summer.
I have. Not for years, but I love that movie.
So she's like their secretary. They basically accidentally catch this guy and get a huge reward. So then they open up their own bounty hunting business on Hollywood Boulevard. And it's really funny. And I watch it and I'm like, man, I wish this was a show. This would have been amazing. And that I had read about because of the people involved. I'm a huge SCTV person and couldn't find it ever in all my tape trading years. And then it's just up on YouTube, which is crazy.
Yeah, it's funny how stuff just shows up. There'll be stuff I'm looking for, but sometimes it gets pulled. Like there was a movie, I really, really wanted to see. I can't even remember what it was now. And it came up on YouTube and I'm like, oh my God. And then when I went back, it was gone.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, there goes that. But like, but yeah, there's some interesting stuff. When Struck by Lightning came on, I just about died because I was like, I can't believe that this, and it turned out that it was a guy who I think he just inherited some VHS or something and decided to just put everything online, and it's just part of a collection of things that were on a VHS tape, and he just put them up. And I don't even think he realized what he had was so super rare. And there was also a TV show, now I can't remember the name of it, with Burt Convy. And, you know, I'm a huge Burt Convy fan. And like, if you ever go on my blog, you'll see it's all Burt Convy. And so,
yeah,
like,
you're the worst.
Yeah, I'm just whatever. And so, so he did a TV series with Ken Howard. Oh God, what's the name of it? And it only had a few episodes. And, Burt Convy is now the new boyfriend of this woman who's divorced from Ken Howard, but somehow the Ken Howard lives nearby or something. And it's about the relationship between everybody. And the woman who plays the mom, whose name again I'm forgetting, I think she was the mom on Too Close for Comfort, not the mom, but the grandmother on Too Close for Comfort.
Yes. I can't remember her name. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, somebody who's a big fan of that actress collected all this woman's stuff, and he's been slowly parsing it out onto YouTube. So he put an episode of the show onto YouTube, and I've been looking for the show for years, so I was able to at least watch one episode of it. And it was amazing because one of the things that makes it so interesting to me, and I meant to mention at the beginning, is that Burt Convy's then wife was one of the writers of the show.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, and I thought it was really interesting. Anne Convy, I think is her name, the woman I'm most jealous of in the world. And and so like, and I thought, oh, that's so neat. They worked on a show together, and she didn't really do much, I think, in Hollywood. And so I thought, oh, I want to check this out. And it wasn't a bad show at all. It was very timely. It was just about like, how do these different types of families become like non-traditional families kind of thing. And, right. And it was, and I enjoyed it for what it was, but it was so neat that somebody just threw it up on YouTube like that.
Yeah, it's worth checking periodically. There's stuff that I'm just like, maybe I'll see if it's up there. And I'm almost always surprised that something usually is, which is kind of crazy. I do want to mention Wednesday night, there is some Halloween content. There is the Fat Albert Halloween special. And don't need to mention Cosby. We all know what a monster he is. But this special has one of my favorite weird lines in a Halloween special. And this is sort of your classic. It sort of takes a Christmas special plot device where there's like an old guy that hates the holiday and they're mean to him, but then they realize why he hates the holiday, and then they involve him in the holiday, and then everybody's happy at the end, but it's Halloween. But in this one, this guy owns like a junkyard, and the Fat Albert Cosby kids start harassing him, and then they scare him, and then Fat Albert goes, "Hey, what did he ever do to you?" And one of the guys goes, "He got old." And then they're just like, "He's an old dude," and they just keep going on about this guy got old, so like screw him. And it's real weird. It's real weird. And Max Gale's in Desperate Women.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Oh, he had a good week, didn't he?
Yeah, he's Lieutenant Spangler in Desperate Women. Oh.
Well, so him and Don Johnson had two things, because you mentioned something earlier that Don Johnson was in, aside from Katie, Portrait Central. That's amazing. These guys are having really good weeks.
American Girls, that Don Johnson.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So what I ended up picking, we were talking about you. So you mentioned Van Patten. So one of my all-time favorite shows is 8 is Enough. And that aired, and I know that episode well. That's the one where Nancy opens up a daycare center, but she can't get the, I think, space she needs for a while, so she opens it up at home. And it's like about like the chaos that ensues with her. Because I don't know if you remember the Nancy character. She was the beautiful blonde that tried to model, and she kept kind of falling in and out of careers. That was sort of her character arc. And so she was always trying new things and not enjoying it. And I think when they did the reunion movie, she ended up getting married to like a farmer and like moving somewhere and becoming like a farmer. And she loved it. And nobody could understand why Nancy did that, because she was so beautiful and she should be a model or whatever. But she ended up doing this thing totally opposite of how everybody had envisioned her. And 8 is Enough to me will always be one of the best shows that was ever on TV. And I think it's just because there's so much heart in it. And it's one of those really warm shows. I think in a lot of ways, maybe it's inconsequential. Like, it's not like anything groundbreaking, except for the first season when Diana Hyland died, and the woman who played the mother, and she, they wrote it into the series. Mm-hmm. And then they brought on, Betty Buckley, and then she would end up marrying, Dick Van Patten's character. And they did deal with that, and that makes it kind of less insubstantial. But usually the stories were, you were kind of in and out, right? And then it was over, but everything was so warm and wonderful. And the family, they had problems, but everybody ended up together at the end. And I come from kind of a family that's, even when I was a kid, we were all sort of estranged from each other. Cause my mom, this is very self-confessional, I don't know why I'm doing it, but my mom was married to a different person before she married my dad, and she had 4 kids. And then she left her husband and married my dad. And a couple of the kids stayed with, their father, and then a couple came with us. And so my brothers and sisters and I never had a relationship that went very deeply, and they all hate each other. And so we don't speak. And so shows like The Waltons and Eight is Enough, I think, are fantasies for me, especially Eight is Enough because it takes place in modern times, and then modern times. And they were all just really cool and happy kids and very close. And I never had that.
So I think, totally identify with that.
Yeah, do you?
Sure. I had a much smaller family, but yeah, I would watch things like Growing Pains and Family Ties and be like, oh, well, they're all like hanging out, doing stuff together. And they seem to have a real warmth. That's weird. Yeah, it's totally bizarre. Like I always, like when people talk about like, oh, I talk to my mother all the time, or like, oh, I was saying, my grandmother, I'm like, you hang out with them? Like I get intellectually, I get that people have this warmth towards their family, but in practice, I'm like, I don't understand that at all.
Yeah.
So the only way I sort of know about those things is through TV, and I sort of have to experience it by proxy or kind of like reverse engineer how that's supposed to be.
Yeah, I was really close to my parents as an adult until they passed away. But like, yeah, as a kid, it was that my mom worked swing shift. So like she was gone in all afternoon before, after I go to bed. And my dad suffered from very severe depression, which I don't mind talking about, because I talk about it all the time to deal with my depression. But like, and so he was home. He was a house house. He was like a Mr. Mom, but there were a lot of days where it was just easier for him not to deal with me. So I spent a lot of time by myself growing up. So I had these brothers and sisters, but they were all much older than me, and they came from a different dad. And a couple of them are really great, and I love them, but like, it's not like such a big deal for me to like stay connected to them at all. And so, yeah, so you're right. So I'd watch these shows and I'm like, look at these people like enjoying their lives. This is so weird. I don't understand it, but I love it. It looks really nice.
Yeah, and I would look at family members often sort of like, I wouldn't have animosity towards them, but they'd be like old coworkers. Like, I used to work with that guy. He was a pretty good guy, but not the same way. So yeah, it was this sort of, it's not even a wish fulfillment. It's like it's almost anthropology watching these family shows. For me, at least it was.
It was just, I didn't really make that connection till later, but then I was like, yeah, this is what I love. And so 8 is Enough would be my 8 o'clock choice. And then 9 o'clock would roll around and it would be all Charlie's Angels all day and all night because I love that show so much. And so with this episode, Bosley believes his friend is being hoodwinked by a parapsychologist. And I can't remember if this is the one with the seance. I don't think it is. I think that one's just called seance, where Kelly gets like possessed or something, or hypnotized to believe something. They try to get her to kill somebody. But I think that this must be their Halloween episode.
Probably.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. This is the one where Cheryl Ladd is dressed up as the magician? They set up, it's in the Magic Castle, and they set up like a sting for this guy at the Magic Castle, and she's dressed like Zatanna.
Yeah, she looks great because they have her in the opening credits in that outfit.
Yeah, I think this is the one, but I might be mistaken.
Yeah, I can't remember. There's only a couple of like supernaturally kind of episodes, but there was one that came later with Tiffany, played by Shelley Hack, where I think she goes into a house that may or may not be haunted, and I think it's just like a Scooby-Doo kind of thing. Or obviously it is. I don't think they ever had like a real ghost. But like, and then Vegas must be a Halloween episode because it's Dan Tana looks for a ghost after a bride-to-be believes her dead father has appeared before her. And I'm like, I don't remember this one. This is one I need to see again. It looks amazing.
And Slim Pickens is in it.
Well, then I'm sold.
Which is pretty amazing, and Tony Curtis as well. Also want to mention on Merv Griffith that night, Della Reese, Dick Shawn, Stephen Ford, Anne Marie Blake, and weirdly promoting Can't Stop the Music, Steve Guttenberg.
Oh, that's amazing.
1978, Steve Guttenberg.
You know, for years I believed that Nancy Walker was not the Nancy Walker from Rhoda that directed Can't Stop the Music.
Can't Stop the Music?
Yeah, I refused to believe it was the same person because I couldn't imagine that it was the same woman. But there's finally, thanks to the internet, there's a promotional still of her actually directing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I blew my mind. Like, I knew it was her later, but then I couldn't, like, in my head picture her doing it. And it blows my mind that she did Can't Stop the Music, which is, to me, say what you will, but I love that movie so much.
It's very entertaining. It is very entertaining.
It's its own universe, and it does a really good job of creating that universe. There's a scene with Bruce Jenner in like Daisy Dukes in a half shirt. And the last time I saw this movie, I was actually living in LA, and I had a roommate, and he was asleep, and I was watching it like on AMC or something. And Bruce Jenner comes out in his little Daisy Dukes, and I actually screamed, "Oh my God!" And I think I woke up my roommate.
Yeah, that's the correct reaction to that scene in Can't Stop the Music.
But it's a lot of fun, and I like the Village People, and it's got a high energy, and, you know, it's just one of those movies you watch and you just enjoy yourself.
Oh yeah, it fits right in there with Xanadu and The Wiz and sort of that whole aesthetic of that time. It's very, very much the pre-AIDS world disco. Yeah,
that's a good way to describe it, actually. Yeah, just a lot of fun.
I enjoy that movie. Where are we, Thursday?
Yeah. So Thursday was a really interesting TV movie that I finally just saw for the first time called Cotton Candy, which was directed by Ron Howard.
Yes.
And
I've never heard of this.
Yeah, it's in my book, and that's actually how I heard of it. Somebody reviewed it, and I thought, what is this? And I was fascinated by it, and I was super fascinated when I did the research for it for tonight to see that it aired on NBC, because you would think ABC would take the chance to show something Ron Howard directed because Happy Days was such a juggernaut at the time. But for whatever reason, NBC picked it up or produced it or did whatever, and they didn't give a screening copy to Judith Crist, so there was no review of it. But it did pretty good in the ratings. It came in at number 26 for the week and number 102 for the season with a 19.1/30. And so basically what it's about, Ron Howard isn't in it. It stars Charles Martin Smith as this kid who's like his senior year of high school or something, and he can't really figure out how he's going to like leave his legacy. So he does all these things, like he tries out for the football team, and finally he decides to put a band together. And they're not super misfitty because they're not really geeky, but they're these kids that are just kind of regular kids, and they form a band and they're pretty good at it. But the problem is that they're not as cool as the local super cool band called Rapid Fire, run by a guy named Mark Wheeler. And they keep doing like I Shot the Sheriff and all these like horrific versions of it, but they have like pyrotechnics and stuff. And so like they play at the mall, and like there's explosions, and like Mark Wheeler's super sexy. He was in Zuma Beach, and he's this really handsome, kind of David Cassidy type. And he's in a bunch of Ron Howard movies, I think, actually. And so like this band is like, but we're just a really good band, but nobody's paying attention. So it's sort of like the rival between the two bands. And it's actually a really wonderful, little TV movie. And I'm super surprised that as big as Ron Howard is, we've never seen a release of this, because just his name alone makes it a curiosity for people. And also it's a really good movie. So I'm not really sure why it fell through the cracks this way, but it's something to seek out.
And Clint Howard is in it.
That's right,
brother,
yes.
As Corky McPherson, speaking of Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 4. But it having not seen it, and it being 1978 and sort of in proximity to Rock and Roll High School, it sounds very Rock and Roll High School-ish to me, which also has Clint Howard in it. Which may just be why I'm thinking of that.
Yeah, it's not quite. So I don't know how I would describe Rock and Roll High School. But Rock and Roll High School has like, and it's not to. I can't think of the right words because I want to say it's like it's more self-aware.
And archaic. It's more cartoonish in a good way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a great movie. This movie is just kind of a sweet coming of age story. And so it's nothing like that, but it might make a good companion with it, I think. Cause it's sort of like about the uprising, right, of the underdog to some degree. So like, but it's Charles Martin Smith's really good in it. There's this really interesting scene where they play strip poker because the girl, they have a female drummer, and there's this scene that you think is going to get really creepy, and it's actually really suspenseful, where they get to the point where she has to take off her shirt at the strip poker game. Mm-hmm. And I won't say how it plays out, but I think it's handled really well. And so they're just dealing with like things that teenagers deal with, and it's a fun movie, but it also has, I think it captures the high school experience really well.
I'll have to check this out. I'm a sucker for any sort of teen movies. And this would have been the second thing Ron Howard directed. I believe he made a deal with Corman before this, where if he starred in Eat My Dust, he could direct, what was the other car movie he directed? It was a year before this. What the hell's it? Oh, Grand Theft Auto. He directed that.
It. Yeah, I can only think of Eat My Dust.
Yeah, so he starred in Eat My Dust, but the deal he made with Corman was, I'll be in one and let me direct one, because I want to direct movies. So he made Cotton Candy, must have been immediately after that. And opposite Cotton Candy is Halloween is Grinch Night, which is terrible.
Oh, I've never seen that.
It's real bad. Like, as good as The Grinch Stole Christmas is, and it's like a perennial holiday favorite, everybody loves it, there's a reason why Halloween is Grinch Night does not air every Halloween. It's real bad. I think this might have been, it was about 10 years after The Grinch Stole Christmas, and I don't think it was based on I don't think there's a Dr. Seuss source book for it. And it really shows. It's just awful. It is almost unwatchably bad, which is pretty terrible for it being a Grinch movie, Halloween, and only a half an hour.
It makes me so sad when I see stuff like that. Like, for a while, they were trying to sort of redo the kind of Rankin and Bassey kind of Christmas stuff. And some of them ended up okay, but some of them you just watch and you're just like, oh, this is painful.
It's real bad. And also that week, I think the night before, there was the Bugs Bunny Halloween special. Oh. And those 70s and 80s Bugs Bunny specials are god awful, because what they would do is they'd get some really terribly off-model, cheap wraparound animation, and then edit together a bunch of old shorts that are beautiful and funny, and just showed you how terrible the opening stuff is. And this Bugs Bunny one, it's some of the worst cheap 70s animation possible that this wraparound segment is, and it's jarring and weird, and you're like, this is why. And it makes sense, because it was a cash-in. They planned to air it, twice on TV in the 70s. I don't think they thought people were going to be looking at it 30 years later, but it's bad. It's real bad.
Yikes. And after Cotton Candy was Quincy. And I'm a huge Quincy fan, but now we're walking into the Quincy sort of social justice issues. So, yes. I think after season 5, Quincy decided, or Jack Klugman, he wanted to do sort of a Lou Granty kind of thing. Although I don't know if I guess Lou Grant would be on the air by now. Or maybe.
I think she started, yeah.
Yeah, and so he really wanted to start taking on these super topical issues, but as a coroner. It works a little bit better when you're a newspaper man, I think. But so he did these crazy episodes. This one I don't think was as crazy. This was an affirmative action one, where a black resident at a hospital is accused of negligence, and that one might actually have some stuff going to it. But I'm thinking of the one where there's all these kids that are hooked on over the counter speed drugs, no-dos. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
And Simon Oakland, I think it's Simon Oakland, owns this store that it's a bong shop or something, and Quincy goes in there and destroys it because he's all angry about this guy selling these pills. And I'm that's this guy's business.
Yeah, he's perfectly legal.
Yes. And I don't like it, but you can't just walk in and destroy somebody's place of business. And then there's that great one where it's the guy who did the voice of, from Netzer Long-Eared Donkey that narrates it. And, I can't think of his name, but he sets himself on fire. He's freebasing before a show. He's a musician, and Quincy's gone to the concert, and he runs out on stage on fire. And so Quincy puts him out or whatever, and the guy's in the hospital and he's 90% burnt. And Quincy's lecturing him about doing drugs. And I'm like, Quincy, you're an alcoholic.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, it's like the punk rock episode. I mean, the Quincy punk rock episode is just amazingly stupid. And it weirdly, because almost all those get it wrong. I always say that TV punk rockers always got it wrong by the guy would have a mohawk and a beard. No, they don't have beards. But in that one, that sort of talk show, that Donahue-esque talk show scene at the end, where they sort of inadvertently get it right with some of the kids that are talking.
Yes.
I wonder if some of that was ad-libbed or they asked the kids, because the dialogue in those scenes is totally different from the rest of the thing, and a totally different tone and much more sympathetic and realistic.
here at the Austin Film Society, they played that episode theatrically with the Chips punk rock episode, but I had to leave before the Chips one.
That one's terrible.
But they brought the writer of the episode of Quincy to Austin to talk about it. And I don't remember,
Wow.
He didn't talk about ad-libbing. What he said was that they had no idea what they were doing. Somebody came up with an idea that they needed to address punk rock or something, and they just wrote it, and they guessed on a lot of it. And he admitted to that. And he kind of was being sort of maybe too self-mocking, because there's a lot I like about that episode. I actually really like the music in it too. And, it's not bad, but the part at the end where he gets up on stage to rally the kids together when they're looking for the missing girl. It's hilarious. Get off the stage, man. But he's standing there, and it's Jack Klugman. And it's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. But,
you worship nihilism and death.
But it's a really fun episode. But what's so funny about this Quincy and Cotton Candy episodes or movie is that they ran together, and they ended up tying in the ratings, which I think is really odd, because it's not very often that shows air together and they get the exact same ratings. Usually one does better than the other, even if it's just slightly, but they got the exact same ratings number. So the Cotton Candy audience apparently stayed for Quincy or something. And which blows my mind, but but they got the exact same ratings number.
That's weird. That's I just don't want to get out of my chair kind of rating, I imagine.
It's possible. There's also I guess there could be a Quincy, but do you remember the one where Quincy, it's Conchita Ferrell, and if I'm saying her name right, and she has this family, and it starts with a guy she's not there yet, walking into the house she lives in and murdering her entire family with a knife.
Yes, it's like the Amityville Horror or something.
Yes.
Almost like that scene. Yes.
It's her brother, and he's bipolar or something. And she comes home, and her whole family is dead. And as a kid, that was like watching a horror movie. I never forgot it.
Oh yeah. And especially where you turn, even though Quincy was about death, and it was a little bit more gruesome than your typical sort of Perry Mason, because it was about a pathologist and a coroner, but it wasn't super gory and scary usually, but that I distinctly recall that episode, because you were just I don't know, just what just happened. It was brutal.
It was scary. It was as a kid, you're just this is like watching a horror movie that I'm not allowed to watch, And, but my mom loved Quincy. She was a nurse, and my parents both were kind of into true crime. And so she would have me watch Quincy. And as a kid, it was kind of like pulling nails again, because it was a show about a doctor. What do I care, And, but as I got older, I rewatched every episode. It reran when I was living in LA on a local channel when I wasn't working. And so I spent the entire summer just watching Quincy every afternoon. And I loved it. But as the seasons wore on, it got crazier and crazier. And by the end of it, it was just a crescendo of just what topic are we going to just blow out of proportion this week? And it was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, the longer shows go on, the weirder they tend to get, because they've done everything, and then usually the people who started it have gone, and they let the star get in charge, or just people who are just bonker. It's always more than 4 seasons usually start to get weird.
Yeah, well, it got weird, but it got weird in the most beautiful way possible.
Yes, that's always good when it comes together like that. Oh, and the Chips punk rock episode is pretty terrible, but the only highlight is that Ponch has to go undercover as a punk rocker, which is hilarious anyway. And at some point, John comes into the locker room, and Ponch is slamming into all the lockers. And he's like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "I'm practicing slam dancing, man."
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I've never really seen Chips. I bought the first season, but I haven't really sat down with it yet. And I don't remember watching it I watched TJ Hooker, but I don't remember watching Chips.
I didn't really like Chips that much. TJ Hooker I did like more, although since doing this show, I've had a bunch of people who were on TJ Hooker, and I've just heard a billion horror stories about Shatner. Jill Sholin had one of the, oh my God, she was playing he was directing the episode, and she was playing, and this is talking out of school, she told this on the show, but she was playing a teenage prostitute, and she's running down Hollywood Boulevard, and her tube top falls off. So she's literally topless in Hollywood Boulevard in the middle of the day, and she's, 18. And so she covers up and yells, "Cut." And Shatner lost his mind because she yelled, "Cut." And he was like, "You never, if I want you to stand down here naked in front of," just humiliated her in front of this whole crew, in front of a busy Hollywood Boulevard in the middle of the day. It just was, I was like, oh, that's
already on
awful.
top of the fact that she must be already like horrifically, I don't even, can't even imagine what that was like for her.
Yeah, I mean, it's already horrible. Like, it's not like she was yelling cut being some diva actress. Like, it was a normal reaction to, like, an embarrassing thing. And he just made it so much worse. I've heard a ton of stories like that where I'm just like, yeah. But Jill Schoelen, absolute sweetheart.
Oh, yeah, I met her and when I was living in L.A. at my friend Eric Spudik had a video store called Spudik's Empire or something like that. And he would have people come and do, like, signings. And so they did, like, a Stepfather thing where they had different people from the different Stepfather movies come. Yeah, like Meg Foster was there and Caroline Williams, I think is her name from the second one, and Jill Schoelen. And so, of course, I went to meet Jill Schoelen. She's in this movie that I love called Rich Girl. That came out in 91. It's, like, one of my all-time favorite movies. And I actually met Sherry Curry. And I told her I love that movie, and she could not stop laughing. And I met Don Michael Paul, and he laughed too. When I tell people, they laugh. And so when I told Jill Schoelen I love that movie, she looked at me very earnestly, and she said, "What is it about it that you love?"
Yeah.
And then I felt all on the spot because I was like, oh, well, it's just a really good movie. But I didn't have like a critique for her or anything. It's just a movie that I love to watch, you know.
Yeah.
It's really fun and she's great in it. And we ended up talking for a while. And at the end, she gave me a hug and she was just so sweet.
She's so sweet and genuine and has been in some major stuff and is totally humble and very down to earth and normal. And she grew up literally in Burbank. But you would never think that she's fascinating and was in a ton of TV movie stuff, including The Babes in Toyland, which I think was her first thing.
That's right. I remember hearing somewhere that Brad Pitt said the only girl who ever broke his heart was Jill Schoelen, and I absolutely believe it.
They were engaged.
Yes.
They're in Cutting Class together as well.
That's right.
And of course, Popcorn, which is one of my all-time favorite movies ever.
Yeah, that actually played here last year on the big screen, and I've seen it several times, but it was so good on the big screen.
It's great. Tom Villard, who's no longer with us, is great. You know, the only horror movie shot in Jamaica.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was a weird tax shelter thing, but they shot it in Jamaica, and Jill has some interesting stories about that. She was the original actress was fired halfway through shooting, and Jill replaced her. And had to go out and reshoot stuff. It's kind of amazing that movie is even halfway decent given all the issues they had shooting that movie.
Yeah, it's got weird Bob Clark connections too, because Alan Ormsby, I think, directed the films that they're watching. Yep. Or I think I heard that. And Mark Harrier, I think I'm saying his name right, was in Porky's.
Yes.
And he directed the film. And I don't know how that came to be, but I don't know that he directed anything else.
Yeah, because they had planned to shoot it in Florida, which would make sense with that crew. And something happened where there was a money thing, and so they went to Jamaica for it. It's like a really bizarre, complicated history that movie has. But again, it's amazing that movie is good, and it would make a great double feature with Joe Dante's Matinee, I think.
Oh, did you know I've never seen Matinee?
Oh, you got to. It's great.
Yeah, I know. I love John Goodman.
Did you ever watch Erie, Indiana?
I didn't.
It's what's his name? Omri Katz, who I think was on Dallas. The kid, he was the main kid in
oh yeah. I know you're talking about. Yeah.
He's the main kid in Matinee as well, and Matinee is great. John Goodman, it might be my favorite John Goodman role. He's just so good in it. But great. Where are we? Final night of the week.
Yeah, we finally made it. So there was no TV movie this night. It was a theatrical. It was De Palma's Obsession with Cliff Robertson, which, I've never seen, and I have it. I've had it for like 2 decades, and I don't know why. I love De Palma, so I'm not sure why I haven't seen it. But
I have never seen it, and I love De Palma.
Yeah, it's weird. It just slipped through the cracks, and yet I have it's just taped off cable, but I don't know why I haven't seen it. But apparently nobody saw it because it was the lowest rated movie to air that week. Came in at number 54 out of 60 or 59 things to air that week. So it was just not for anybody, apparently. I don't know why that is, but I can't imagine it's a bad movie. This is like prime De Palma era, so I don't know. But my picks ended up being something I've never seen, and this is the first time I've heard of it, but I bet you know all about it. It's called Witches' Night Out with Gilda Radner as one of the voices. I've never seen it.
Yes, it's very weird. It's up for free on most streaming services now. It's very, very 70s. It was the second in a series of specials. I think the first one was a Christmas one, and it's very weird character design. It was done, I believe, by Nelvana, who's a Canadian animation animation studio that did Care Bears and a bunch of stuff later. A lot of the people worked on Heavy Metal. And Nelvana also did Rock and Rule, if you've ever seen that with Debbie Harry, which is a great animated movie. But it's very, very 70s, and there's some genuinely weird, scary moments in it where the kids turn into monsters. And Lorraine Newman actually does a voice as well. There's a few Saturday Night Live people that do voices in this. Catherine O'Hara does a voice, I believe. It's much like Heavy Metal, because a lot of the SCTV people did voices in Heavy Metal, like John Candy and Harold Ramis and Dave Thomas. And so it's weird. It's very quick. It's a quick half hour. It's very 70s, but I know it's running for free on like Vudu has it, Amazon has it. If you're a Halloween special fan, it's worth watching probably once. It's sort of a love it or hate it. It's not bad. It's just very, very, it has a very specific style. It's very stylized, and I think you either like it or you don't. It reminds me a lot of, have you ever seen the special The Point?
I was just going to ask you about that. So, yeah, I don't know if I should say this, but I was hopefully going to be on some extras for the release of The Point that just came out, but the stuff I didn't make the cut. But it's in my book too. Somebody reviewed it. I think with Kayla Janice. I think she did the extras for The Point release. So, she interviewed me about stuff about the movie of the week, because it was an ABC movie of the week, and it has an interesting history because they had 3 different narrators. Because who was the first narrator? Was it Dustin Hoffman?
I think so, yeah.
And then they couldn't use him in like subsequent reruns for some reason. So it finally went through like Ringo Starr and ended up with Alan Thicke at the end or something like that.
yeah. Which, as all things do. They all end with Alan Thicke. Yeah, it's not related to that movie at all, but the design and sort of aesthetic of it's very similar.
When you were saying that, like when you're saying like 70s animation, I think of The Point because it has a very specific kind of a post-psychedelic sort of vibe to it. Yep. That's really interesting with like, it's almost like, is it Egon Schiele who draws those people that are like, they look like they're in motion because of the way he draws it. Kind of, that's how the art feels to me when I watch The Point, even though obviously they're moving because it's a moving animation, but it's got that sort of like frantic sort of feel to it.
It's like a psychedelic, more simplified Schoolhouse Rock kind of thing. Yeah. Or reminds me of that Puff the Magic Dragon TV special. That sort of realm, but it's worth watching once, especially if you're a Halloween fan. But it is very 70s. It's too 70s for me as an 80s kid. It's almost that like it makes me think of like rattan and beige and Okay, I'm in. Yeah, it's that kind of thing. But it's worth watching. And it's up against the very first ever Magic of David Copperfield special.
Ooh, I didn't know that was the first one. I did see that in there. There's a really nice ad in this TV guide to promote it, like a really big, beautiful. Oh, and there's Sherman Hemsley.
Yep, and Orson Welles and Cindy Williams and Bernadette Peters, Valerie Bertinelli. It's his very first special. He really changed the magic special forever with this, because before that, you had basically Blackstone, who was a great magician, but was very much a classic sort of Mandrake style magician. And then you had Doug Henning, who is a whole different thing. Yeah. But Copperfield was young and kind of cool. And these were relatively cutting edge for the time. And then he's in Terror Train in 1980, I think Terror Train is.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is the very first one, and it's kind of cool, and it's cool to see Orson Welles in it. And not that Orson Welles would be in anything around this time, is when he kind of started just being in anything. But it's worth watching. It's a weird mix because it still has a sort of 70s aesthetic, but it's ahead of its time in that so many of the things David Copperfield would do later were the most 80s cliches of all time. But he's sort of inventing those with this in a lot of ways, a couple of years before.
Yeah, I remember he would do like make a plane disappear, and didn't he make the Statue of Liberty or something disappear, something crazy like that?
Yep. And he did a thing where he flew, and then he did a very interesting special in 1989 with Jane Seymour, actually, that was called Magic on the Orient Express. And he did a trick that's actually a very simple sort of math trick, but it was interactive with the viewers, and that he had cards up on the screen and you picked the cards and he would eliminate them and he picked your card basically. And it was one of the first major television specials to do sort of a magic trick via television and you as the viewer. And it was very clever. He did, the stuff's really cheesy. I always just think of like most things as like Copperfield, who looks exactly like Bob Saget. And they got a similar look going.
I guess I can see they could be cop buddies in that movie together.
Yeah. And him erotically hypnotizing a woman to float while Peter Gabriel plays is pretty much how most David Copperfield things go. But the first special's fun.
It sounds amazing. Yeah, I totally flipped past it because I was like, well, but I remember watching all of the other specials, like the ones in the 80s, because they would have like Catherine Bach's going to disappear on this plane or whatever. And
oh, yeah.
I was like,
yeah.
Catherine Bach, I love her, and I would tune in to watch it.
Yeah, this one's much more traditional, like a stage magic show in a studio, whereas the ones that you're thinking of and the ones people remember most of the 80s, they were like big outdoor spectacles. They're almost like evil specials or something like that. Before David Blaine kind of ruined everything for him by doing street magic. But it's worth watching. It's fun. And weirdly, at the same exact time, Donnie and Marie is on with Sherman Hemsley as well.
I'm just anything with Sherman Hemsley, first of all, I'm sold. But it sounds like it's kind of both really amazing in a really good way and then really surreal in other ways. Absolutely.
There's in the town that I live in, there's a little theater here, and right before I moved here, they were doing a version of The Odd Couple starring Sherman Hemsley and Pat Morita.
Oh my God.
And my dentist always talks about how he had to work on Sherman Hemsley because he cracked a crown or something. It's just like, I'm mad that I didn't see that.
Oh my God, I would die. Yeah, Sherman Hemsley, I have every episode of Amen. And I know everybody thinks of the Jeffersons when they think of him, but Amen was like such an amazing show. So amazing. And, especially as the series went on and they started kind of giving Thelma, the actress who played his daughter, Anna Marie Horsford, I think is her name. They started giving her more and more stuff to do. And she's so hilarious. And there's so much physical comedy in that show. It's just amazing.
It got more and more broad as it went on, for sure.
It did, but it was fun. It was just really fun. She joined the military, and so Sherman Hemsley and Clifton Davis dressed up like women and pretended like they were part of the people that were serving with her in basic training, and it was silly, but I don't know. It was
very old fashioned. It was like a real throwback sort of 50s feel to it.
Yeah, it was just, that show. Okay. So anyway, he's been in my heart. There's a picture of him on IMDb hanging out with Larry Hagman, and I'm like, oh my God, if I could have just been there that day, it would have been the best day of my life. But I have met Larry Hagman, but I didn't get to meet Sherman Hemsley, which is unfortunate. But Larry Hagman was a sweetheart. So anyway, Witches Night Out. And then the other show I picked was a show that I have seen, but only as an adult, and I don't know it that well, but it's called Who's Watching the Kids?
With Jim Belushi.
Yeah, I saw that he was in the credits, and I don't remember him, but it took place in Vegas, if I'm correct. And I think as an adult, I watched it because I was really fascinated by how they portrayed Vegas. And I think really all you see are sets of people's apartments, but it kind of looks fairly accurate to what the 70s Vegas was for me. And was this the one with Scott Baio?
Yes, Scott Baio.
Yeah, it's the right show.
Pre-Joni Loves Chachi, post-Happy Days, I think.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I guess it would be because Happy Days was running at this time. And the episode was really weird. So at first I thought they were mixing up a plot line with Hello, Larry, because there's a character named Larry apparently on Who's Watching the Kids. And I guess he's a DJ or something. And it's like Larry is taken hostage by a man who threatens to detonate a bomb on the air unless the world stops smoking.
Yes.
And what?
That's a very Barney Miller type plot. Not quite Barney Miller, but Night Court. That sounds like a plot of a Night Court episode.
Yeah, it does. It's Scott Baio. It's a kid, but then he wants the world to stop smoking. I couldn't wrap my brain around it, and so I thought I have to watch it.
Yeah, Jim Belushi was in a few sitcoms. He was also in Working Stiffs with Michael Keaton the same year or the year after. They really pushed him for sitcoms before he wasn't on SNL till 84, 85, I think was when he was on that show. But he showed up in a bunch of sitcoms, and this is one of them. I've seen one episode. I don't remember a lot about it. It seemed very sort of traditional late 70s show. But I might see if I can dig up some more episodes because that sounds real weird.
Yeah, I remember liking it enough. I think it's like you said, it's pretty traditional. There's nothing necessarily special about it, except that I believe it took place in Vegas, which is why I watched it.
If I remember, it sort of reminded me of It's Your Move, but without the charm of Jason Bateman.
That must be why I'm picturing Karen Kay as the mom.
Yeah.
Because she was the mom in It's Your Move.
It had either the apartments looked the same, or it was like a similar sort of something about it. I always just It's Your Move is what I think of. Someone will write in and tell me why I'm thinking that.
Yeah, maybe. I loved It's Your Move. I have every episode of that too.
Oh, It's Your Move's really great.
So good. And then the last thing I picked was Incredible Hulk, and I thought that the synopsis was really funny. I just wrote Banner learns meditation.
Yes.
And I'm not sure that makes a whole episode, but yeah, I'll watch it.
This is a Chinese philosopher tries to help David control his affliction by teaching him to meditate. And Mako plays Lee Sung.
Who then I'm in.
A ton of stuff. This is sort of like, if I recall this episode, it feels like an episode of Kung Fu, but just with Banner, with Bixby in it for some reason. It's got a weird vibe to it. And is keeping in that sort of 70s self-help meditation aesthetic.
Well, two things come to mind. One is years ago I was at a convention and oh my God, Lorenzo Lamas was there for Renegade and with his ex-wife and his new wife, because his ex-wife starred in the first season of Renegade, maybe some other seasons, I can't remember.
Shauna Sands, was that the
No, yeah, I think that might be the second wife. The Kathleen Kinmont was the wife that he started the series with. I love Kathleen Kinmont. And
she's in Bride of Reanimator.
Yes, she is. And she's amazing. She just seems like an amazing person. And so well, that's another offshoot. But anyway, so anyway, they were at this convention and Mako was at the same table as them, but he was like at the other end of it. It was weird. They had this long table. So it was Kathleen Kinmont, her ex-husband, his new wife, which was very uncomfortable, and Mako. And Mako was eating a sandwich by himself. And I didn't meet any of them at that thing, but I remember just thinking how weird that was. It was like when I saw, is it her name Cynthia Myers from, Beyond the Valley of the Dolls was at a convention where she was smoking cigarettes with the Toxic Avenger and William Lustig. And I wish I had a photo of it because that's the craziest thing I've ever seen, and it was amazing.
That just reminds me, when I did Reno Pop Culture Con last year, it was a little bit slow, and I won't say their names on the air, but I can tell you later. But there was a bunch of actors there who do very, very prominent voices in cartoons, and some of them their speaking voice is very similar to some of the voices they do in cartoons. And in the green room, they were just complaining and swearing to each other about how slow the con was, but I could just hear them as their characters doing it. So it's real bizarre. That's
kind of fun, though. Actually, it
was pretty amazing.
See that.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing.
My second Incredible Hulk story is that I can only now watch The Incredible Hulk some 30-something years after originally aired, because there's a two-parter Incredible Hulk with Mariette Hartley, which you may know, where she's dying of some kind of cancer, I think. And she's also a doctor of some sort. And I think she's trying to help him find a cure for whatever is ailing David Banner. And they fall in love. And I think she dies, and while he's holding her in his arms as the Hulk, he's trying to get her to the hospital. So anyway, this aired as a two-parter, and in one of, I think it's in the second part, in the opening, she's found out she's dying, and so she goes kind of berserk, and she's like kind of blowing off some steam. She ends up at this like singles bar, and these two guys pick her up. I think it's two guys, and they take her home to their house, and David Banner shows up, and they start harassing him. So they throw him behind a couch, and of course he gets angry and he becomes the Incredible Hulk. And so it's supposed to be funny, but I guess I was 7 or 8 when it aired, and I didn't understand what they were doing. So he picks up one of the guys who's like this total disco god with like the shirt unbuttoned down to his navel and the gold medallion and the really tight polyester pants. And David Banner throws him across the room, as the Hulk. But while he's throwing him, he's actually taken his toupee into his hand, right? And so the guy goes across the room, and then he's bald. And when he gets to the other side, and he's really humiliated or whatever. And I thought the Incredible Hulk scalped him and made him bald. And I thought he ripped off his top of his head. And so I couldn't watch the Incredible Hulk for years and years after that because he scared me. And
when I was 2 years old, my parents somehow interpreted my terror of the Incredible Hulk as me really loving the Incredible Hulk. And so for my second birthday, they had my Uncle Paul's bodybuilder friend paint himself green and surprise me. And as you can imagine, I completely lost my shit, terrified. And they were so mad because they went through all this trouble and I was like ungrateful for it.
Wow. I mean, come on. I could see how he'd be scary to a 2-year-old for sure. It's like when you first meet Santa Claus and you're like, this is not something I recognize.
Yeah.
You know? And it's scary, but like, yeah, I just thought he was like a real mean guy. And so I went around like most of my life thinking he just like does horrible things to people. And then finally, I sat down and started watching the series again. And I'm like, oh, this isn't so bad. I think I can take it. And I've only seen a handful of episodes since then. It's quite good, but like I had to rewatch that episode because I wrote about it for Kinder Trauma. And, it was literally like white knuckle terror till I got to that scene because I was waiting for it to happen and I wasn't sure what my reaction would be. And then I'm like, oh wait, this is kind of funny. Okay, I can watch it.
It's funny how tone is lost on kids a lot of times with stuff. We're just seeing the like the actual just things and not the overall tone. And it's, that stuff can stick with you and be terrifying. I know people. I used to have a live weekly show, and then I'll let you go because I'm sorry I took up your whole night. But and I had a segment called TV Casualty. And so someone like a comic would come on and they'd talk about something they saw on TV as a kid that was not meant to be scary, but scared them. And then we'd all watch it as the audience to like help them get over it. And, some of them just shocked me. So there was like your usual ones, like the Punky Brewster Pearls, the Punky one, stuff like that. Yeah. But one guy was terrified of the opening credits to The Wide World of Sports. Because there's like a really vicious ski wipeout that like just really bothered him and he couldn't. So we watched that. But one person was really, really horrified by the Dregs of Humanity episode of It's Your Move. It's Dregs of Humanity where he pretends that that's a real band and that they
I don't know.
So it's a two-parter and Jason Bateman makes up a band to play at this school dance called I think they're called the Dregs of Humanity, and he pretends they all died in a car wreck so they can't play. But then he has to get them to play because for some reason, so he gets all these skeletons from the science lab and they like puppeteer them in this scene where they're like sort of backlit and they play this like horror rock thing, and it's stupid. But this person had seen that as a kid and was horrified because it's skeletons,
Sure.
So there's all kinds of stuff like that I think you just wouldn't even. Kids just look at the visual and the tone is completely lost on them.
That's amazing. I would have loved to have seen those to see because I'm sure somebody came up with the famous MASH episode where they have all the dreams.
Yes.
That must have happened, but then that's legit because that's really disturbing. And I think even adult MASH viewers didn't know how to handle that episode. But like you said, there's like these innocuous things that we like filter into our head. Like I remember a movie, I don't even know what movie it was, where a girl's dress started coming apart while she was performing. And, it was just playing on the local channel and like it doesn't show anything, but it was like literally like almost like a hillbilly film where somebody was like in like a little backwoods bar and they were performing and then something happened to their dress and they didn't end up naked or anything, but it was really upsetting for me, like the idea of it. And I just caught it on TV, just that portion of it. And for some reason I never forgot it, but like it seemed really humiliating. And I felt like humiliated watching it as she was doing it. Cause I think she kept trying to perform, but things kept getting worse and worse, and it just upset me.
It was always fascinating to me when I would talk to the people about doing the segment, and a lot of times they wouldn't even remember what it was. So they'd kind of describe it to me and I'd tell them what it was. And 9 times out of 10 it was the peanut butter solution or Watcher in the Woods. But usually it would be like the first word they got out, I'm like, the peanut butter solution? They're like, oh my God, yes. But they would describe it in a way that it sounded horrific. And then I literally would have to be like, that's a Punky Brewster. And they would be like, what? Because they just couldn't, that's what it was. And then we'd watch it and they'd be like, oh my God, that you're right. And it doesn't take a lot, I think, to get burned into a kid's brain for a long time. And then as the years go on, it gets bigger and bigger.
So wait, just real quick, since you're my therapist right now, there's one more that I just want to mention. It took me years to figure out what it was. It was like a CBS Storybreak. It was like, do you remember the ABC had that? Maybe it was ABC Storybreak. It wasn't the ABC Storybreak, but it was like the competitor on CBS, and it aired, I guess, on the weekends. And they did novelizations, and they would just adapt them. Yep. And they did one called The Girl with ESP, I think is the name of it. Yes. And I think that's the title of it. And there's a girl and she can see things. And I've never been able to see the whole episode since it originally aired, but there's somebody uploaded the segment that really upsets me. So there's a scene where, somebody comes to visit her and she has a premonition, and the premonition is this girl standing in a room that's like all white, and all of a sudden all these balloons drop on her. And it's like she's drowning in the balloons. And then it cuts back, I guess, to the girl, and she's like, oh, I didn't see anything. Because whatever she saw was so upsetting. And it really upset me as a kid. I never got over it.
Yeah, it's like a primal fear. It's just like a weird surrealist vision that they probably inadvertently, it was probably just cheap to film that way, but then ends up being this, horrific thing. Yeah, that was CBS Storybreak. Bob Keeshan, who was Captain Kangaroo, hosted it in the 70s and 80s, and then Malcolm Jamal Warner hosted it for a long time.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they did some really good episodes. They did a version of Dragonflight. They did a version of Chocolate Fever, How to Eat Fried Worms.
Oh, I remember that one. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot that they did on that show that were actually pretty good adaptations. And I think there was Nelvana as well, actually, that did the animation for a lot of those. Miss Switch to the Rescue, I think, was originally CBS Storybreak. Yeah. But yeah, it doesn't take a lot. And the other thing that traumatizes people forever is PSAs. I mean, there's a lot of PSAs came up. A lot of PSAs. That was mine. Mine was a PSA. It was an AIDS PSA that I thought I had made up, and then somebody found it. They found the clip, and it is horrifying.
Like, well, what is it?
So it's a very slow push in on a hospital bed. And you don't really see the guy in the bed. And the narrator's talking about AIDS and how you get it, and it's not, all the things about it. And as you get closer to the bed, you see the guy in the bed, and he looks like the sloth guy in Seven. Like, just looks like a dead person. And then he reaches out at the camera and it freeze frames. like a shock, like almost like Friday the 13th kind of ending. And I remember seeing it during an episode of Mr. Belvedere. So it was like, between 9:30 and 10 on Friday night, and just being so shaken. And obviously that was kind of the point of it, I think. But for years I found every other AIDS PSA, and I was like, am I making this up? Because I see it so vividly. And it literally was like maybe a year or two ago that a listener of the show found it, and they sent it to me, and I watched it, and I'm like, it is literally just as horrifying as I remember it.
Oh my God.
It is just, it's very effective for what it was doing. But man, is that a scary PSA. It's brutal. A lot of them being obviously the Mormon ones were traumatic for most people.
I saw one with a woman who was holding a photo. I've never seen it since I was a kid. She was holding a photo of herself up so you couldn't see her face, and she was talking about how she fell asleep in bed smoking, and then she lowers the picture and it's her face just burned beyond recognition, like the scars.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, I saw that in the 70s, and I never forgot it.
Have you ever seen any of the UK ones?
Yeah, I was thinking about the one with the kids on the farm, and like they all keep like one poisons himself and one gets run over by a tractor. And I showed it to one of my coworkers who grew up on a farm, and she's like, kids are smarter than that, Amanda. And I'm just like, this doesn't upset you? And she's like, no kid would do this with a tractor. And so it was just funny how it washed over her, but it's like 5 kids, and then by the end of it, they're like all dead.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they absolutely used to do that. The UK, I have a whole DVD of UK PSAs for kids, and they are real terrifying. They still do them too, because there's one with in real life there was this kid in England somewhere who was driving and texting, or he was on the phone, I think. He was talking to a friend on the phone, and he crashed his car and he died. And they did a recreation of the accident with his actual voice. So he maybe was leaving a message for somebody. They have a recording of him, and
And apparently they play the recording and then recreate the accident. And it was really controversial when it aired, but it was to get kids to stop using their phone while they were driving. And I was like, I never saw it. I just read about it. And I was like, yeah, I'm upset just reading it.
There's one I haven't been able to find, and it's one that I used to tape Saturday mornings, and it was on this one Saturday morning tape, so I saw it a million times. But it was a guy played by Rob Stone, who was, oddly enough, Mr. Belvedere again. He was the older brother of Mr. Belvedere. And it was an anti-drinking ad, and he's drunk at a party and just being obnoxious. And I remember he spills beer on somebody, and someone's like, hey, watch it. And he goes, hey, you watch it. And then he's telling a story where he goes, the guy is great. He's the greatest freaking guy in the world. And he starts laughing and he ducks out of frame. And when he comes back up, he's a jackass, like he's got like a donkey head. And that's like the point of it. And it was terrifying. And I have not been able to find that one since then, but that was a scary one. Yeah, it was.
I met Rob Stone when I worked at Borders. I helped him one day, and somebody, and this is the first time I'd ever heard the rumor, but like I was helping him and I get a page. And so I was like, let me get this call. And somebody that was working with me goes, so I guess Rob Stone isn't Marilyn Manson.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, I guess not, but Marilyn Manson shopped at our store too. And so it was funny. It's clearly not Rob Stone, but like, I helped him and he was very nice.
Rob Stone used to be roommates with comedian Doug Benson.
Really?
Yeah, they were roommates in LA for years, and Doug went to almost every taping of Mr. Belvedere.
I would love that, to be honest. That's a dream for me.
Yeah, which is pretty weird. But he's got a million stories. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I'm so glad we finally got to do it. I've wanted to have you on the show for a long time.
Yeah, thank you. This was really fun.
There you go. That's Amanda. Her book, amazing. She is amazing. All of her stuff is great. Had a great time talking to her, as you can tell by the length of this episode. And I cut out a lot. Mostly just us talking about you. Yes, you. All bad stuff. So you didn't want to hear that. But anyway, I'm just kidding. That would be, that's ridiculous. Anyway, next week, brand new episode. This week, great episode. Next week will be a great episode, as is every week. I'm a little biased because it's my show, but you listen to it, so you must agree. And I'll see you again next time for a brand new edition of TV Guidance Counselor.
I think that once I got to Dak Rambo, I'd probably pass out from everything.
You can't take anything more after Dak Rambo. You need to recover.
No. Dan Haggerty in the corner just hanging out with these naked people.